Hello and welcome to the B&B show. My name is Brandon Kane, and the guy over here to my left, that is Seahawks Brendan Nelson coming back into the house here as we continue our ever expanding draft coverage by the year. Brendan, as we go position by position, and we have another one that is an important position, of course, in modern NFL. It kind of does get forgotten a little bit about, but we're going to be looking at today Brendan's center and then specifically left tackles at the college level that are looking to transition over to left guard or right guard, that their future appears to be, by many people's outlook, those potential, this is would they be better served. But Brendan, let's start off with the centers before we get to talking about that. And how you doing
Right.
tonight?
I'm doing pretty good, man. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to hit this, ready to figure this all out.
Still feeling, I'm going to keep asking this question as we go out through the draft process here. And that is this a strengthening draft the more you go through and get to the depths of the prospects viewed here? Is it still more of what you kind of thought it was at first blush? Or is it even maybe weaker? And as we start to get into the depths of these prospects from your standpoint?
I feel like my perception hasn't really changed all that much. It's still a draft where I like a decent amount of stuff at the top. Don't really love what's going on at the bottom. I feel like after about 4, maybe 5 rounds, it gets pretty thin.
Hmm.
And at the end of the day, we're gonna have to do the right things here because it's not a super thick draft where you're guaranteed to get something good falling in your lap.
No, you have to be very tactical in this draft. I think it's a good draft, but it's going to require a very tactical approach and understanding where you can strike, where they're I agree for the most part where you're at on where the beef of this draft really lies. It's no surprise top 5 rounds, but sometimes you can get a little bit more diamonds in the rough types, a little bit more of guys of, well, this guy fell because of injuries, but he's really got this kind of talent. There's not quite as much of that to the depths of this draft at first look. The position we're looking at today is center, Brendan, and one that the Seahawks would seemingly be, I guess, on the surface of it, set. There may be the average fan that would come to you and I right now and say, well, there's no reason for you guys to look at centers. You've got Olu Fashanu that you took in the 5th round last year, and then you signed Nick Harris, UW. So you're set. You starter, backup. What would you say to this kind of outlook on the position right now?
Well, I'm not completely convinced of that. I will say this. I don't think it's a very good center class overall. I don't think it's got a lot to it. So I feel like that might drive you to the decision that you're good because there just isn't that much of an opportunity to get better. But when you really look at it, you've got 2 guys on the roster who have center experience. You've got Olu Fashanu, who's played probably less than 100 snaps in his career, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know he played a little bit last year. And then you have Nick Harris, who is criminally undersized, although that's not the end of the world in this offense, I don't think, and has been a backup basically his whole career and is on a 1-year deal.
Yeah.
So I don't see any reason to just assume that we think we're good there. I don't see any reason to believe that you couldn't play add-on a little bit here. You could even, maybe Nick Harris isn't even guaranteed to be here. Maybe Nick Harris isn't even guaranteed to make this team. I know there's a little bit of guaranteed money, but not a critical amount. So I think that we need to keep our options open here. And I think we need to have an open mind to the things the team might do.
Kind of wonder too, being a local guy with Nick Harris, if they have him sign on a contract where if it is indeed that they get another center behind Olu Fashanu, that then they tell him, okay, look, we're not guaranteeing you a roster spot here, but what we will do is give you a little bit of guaranteed money. And then you know that if we are going to cut you, you're guaranteed to be one of those 16 players on that practice squad that we'll keep in reserve. Whether we get you up to the pro or not, you're always a part basically of the organization from our standpoint at that point, kind of guaranteed. Maybe that's a little bit too outside the box and the kind of deal you'd set up. But
Mhm.
I do just think, Brendan, a center and finding one this draft is not necessarily completely off the board from the Seahawks perspective. If the right guy were to fall into him, that would be the fit to this offense. And it is a little bit of a different offense here in what it's going to require, I think, a bit from the center position here. Would you not say?
Yeah, definitely. There's a big difference. And one reason why I do think the Seahawks might decide to just sail it down mid with the centers they have is because it's hard to find that fit. It's hard to find that right center that does the things you want a center to do in this offense. A couple of candidates, a couple of guys who have a chance, but I don't see a ton of synergy between the kind of move center that we probably need and the move centers that are available in this draft.
Yeah, I see it in the same light. There's guys that can be functional moving into space. There's guys that are nightmares moving into space. There's guys that stumble over their feet moving into space. But there's not many guys that can both move in space, target correctly, and do it on a consistent basis versus what already they have to kind of do in the rest of their game. The combo blocks, holding down nose tackles and pass protection one-on-one, those type of things. It's a truly different type of skill set we're looking for. And so with that said, Brendan, let's look in and start into this center class and dive in with the guy who I think has become the consensus #1 center in this draft by just about everybody's outlook here. And fans tend to not agree on anything, but this would be the kid out of Oregon with 3 names, 3 last names, Jackson Powers Johnson. This big dog out there, big duck, big duck, biggest duck I ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah, Jackson Powers Johnson has become the consensus #1. Some people have him in the first round. You don't see centers go in the first round that often, but I do suspect that this guy will. I think that's the way it's going to break down. I think he's good enough. Over the last couple of years, he has kept Bo Nix incredibly clean. Although I will say Bo Nix makes it easier with the offense that they run over in Oregon. Pretty much everybody on that Oregon offensive line never lets Bo Nix get hit. So wide-bodied, hard to get around. He's got powerful hands. He uses his punches really well. Very strong upper body. He keeps balanced when he's in pass pro really well. He plays with a ferocious edge to him, I think, as well, that you need from these linemen. He's good at calling out stuff pre-snap. He's one of you kind of have to be a center, right? Like that's almost a non-starter. If you're a center but you don't know how to call out blocking stuff, that's tough. That's really tough to get around.
I've seen some that are not great at though that have gotten in here and it does, to your point, end up holding them back. You know what I mean? There's some that you get to the NFL level that just don't seem as comfortable. It slides back to the quarterback that doing it instead of them. And you feel how that holds back a bit of the offense when they don't have it in a major way.
Yeah. So I think he's capable of hitting blocks at the second level, but it's not what you really want. And that's where we have to get into some of the more questionable things about JPJ, right? Like he doesn't really have that much starting experience. I think he was only starting at Oregon for 2 years, these last 2 with Bo Nix. Leverage, even though he's only 6'3", sometimes he plays standing straight up and you get underneath his pads a little bit. I think that's something he's going to have to improve on. He's top heavy. Like I was watching him do the drills at the combine because for the offensive linemen, they have them do the stuff where they're like, oh, shuffle here, shuffle there, shuffle there, shuffle here, run this way, run backwards, run. He looks like he's going to fall over all the time. He's top heavy. He's like, I don't know. It just seems like it's a train wreck waiting to happen almost. And I don't want to say he's bad at it, but I do feel like that's going to create issues if he's trying to pull block, trying to hit blocks at the second level. Lateral quickness when he's pulling isn't that great. And more athletic rushers will give him some difficulties. But overall, objectively speaking, in a vacuum, JPJ, wonderful prospect, definitely worth a first-round pick. But at the same time, if the Seahawks were to actually make this kind of investment at the center position, where they spend a first-round pick on him, because I think that's what it would take, wouldn't you want that guy to be an ideal fit in your offense rather than just an okay one? So that's what gives me pause.
Let me throw the conundrum at you that they might face in this moment. And I'm not saying this is my outlook. I'll give my little dissertation on him as well here. But they find themselves in a place where they look at Jackson as a guy by their outlook. So folks, don't need me on this. I want to present this scenario to Brendan, where they go, this guy is no doubt about it going to be an all-pro for the next 6-7 years. He is young. He's got that Joe Alt factor where, he's still so very young. The upside's going to just be tantalizing there. We know it. We're clearly seeing it. Steve Hutchinson's over here barking in John's ear going, just listen to me, man. Just listen to me. Right. If you're John's perspective and you've got them pounding the table on one side of your ear and that hard for this kind of guy, but then you've got the understanding acknowledgement that he's not necessarily the pure fit. What wins out in that moment, if you're thinking about it from Schneider's perspective here with Jackson, because I think that does what it does kind of boil down to with him, because he will be available to the Hawks one way or another here. Oh, you muted?
I'm sorry about that.
No worries.
What does Ryan Grubb say?
I think we can make it work. Like, he's not giving you the like same pounding the table of the scout or from a Hutchinson guy with his background here, but he's like, I can make it work.
I think you go with it there, but I wouldn't do it at 16. You got to trade back a little bit. I don't think I'm doing it at 16. Like, if I'm spending the 16th pick on a center, he needs to be perfect because centers do not usually go in the top 16 ever. In fact, I remember doing a study. A center has not gone in the top 10 since the 1950s, or at least a guy who was drafted as a center.
Yeah.
So it's not like Creed Humphrey either, right? Where Creed Humphrey didn't really do move block stuff in college because that's not how Oklahoma used him. But there wasn't any reason to believe that he necessarily couldn't do it. And then he got into the NFL and he's doing it.
It's
JPJ
definitely
legitimately can't move like that well because he's so top heavy.
And he's probably got an next 10, 15 pounds off even what Creed had coming out. I mean, he's a legit big boy. I think your assessment's on point where it's, he executes the blocks fundamentally fine that are on the move, especially if he's got to hit a reach block and roll that guy down the line of scrimmage laterally. He's going to do that just fine. He'll keep his feet moving. No matter how he kind of looks, he'll be fine in those moments. But the more you got to have him pull farther out in space, back across the formation, climb down to the second level, you can definitely feel that he is doing everything he can to try to get there on time to land those blocks. But I do think that he can maul and he can move to a degree. Just you can't ask him to move outside. That's that part you speak about where he's just not that fit in a movement-based scheme. I think this is what eventually causes him to be prevented from being taken by the Seahawks. But I do believe that scenario I presented to you could be the one that puts him onto the Seahawks radar because this prospect does seem to have some of that upside that's not atypical, of a center coming out in these classes. And again, so young, there's a lot of reason to believe that he'll have a chance to get up into reaching that potential. But as I put in my comp here in the note, I see a Travis Frederick type who retired from the Cowboys, maybe will become a Hall of Famer. He was the top rated center by PFF last year. So the grading analytics agree with what just the eye test kind of looks as far as that stuff goes. I think he has Pro Bowl potential. I think your outlook here of his strength and his ability to uproot guys off the line, doesn't matter whether you're a three tech or a nose tackle, he's going to take you on a ride and he can do it one-on-one or he can do it, especially with the duo blocks. It's like, good Lord, that's just a lot of power sending you in one direction. But I do think he ends up just going to the more right team that's the better fit, that doesn't ask him to move as much and lets him just sit down there and just beat up on guys over the course of the game. And that's what he will do for you.
Yeah. I think that he will be at his best in a gap scheme, but I think he'll be okay in zone. I think he's going to be a good pro, so I wouldn't be against getting him. But at the same time, if I'm going to be spending a mid-first round pick on a center, I don't want to have these questions. I don't want to have these reservations. So I would say you get back to like 25, 26. If he's still there, okay.
Does he have any upside as far as a potential guard?
That I don't know. That's tough because we haven't seen it, right? We can speculate. And I'd say he probably would be okay there, but I wouldn't want to have the upside of my first round pick be a guy who's okay.
Yeah, no, it's well said. And I think he could probably hold up there for you for a little while if you needed to him in a pinch for a bit, but his best outlook is to be as a center. And again, just don't ask him to move around, and that's okay. There's there's schemes that don't ask your center to move as much. And so you just put him in something that fits him right. And I do like him. I love the potential and upside on him, Brendan. I think him and Joe Alt have the highest upside, maybe of any of the linemen in this draft, but part of because of their youth, but just not quite he would have been a great fit for the old, Carroll scheme, man. This guy Carroll would have been jumping up and down saying 16, 16.
And it might have worked. That might have been worth it with Carroll. That
I'm not knocking. I'm not. Yeah, just it's a different.
That could have worked.
It's more about the speaking of differences than it would knock Carroll for. It's like, hey, the kid's really talented. It's understandable why he could potentially be that one outlier player to go this high. Frederick went, I think, top 21 or something, I want to say. So I believe he was a first rounder.
He was a first rounder. I don't think he was top 20, but he was in the first.
Yeah, and a hell of a player. All right, let's get to the number 2 guy that I have on my list here in this draft, the number 2 center, and this would be the kid out of Georgia. We thought maybe come out last year, went back to Georgia for another year, had a solid season there. And this would be the big man, Cedric Van Pran. I say big at 298 versus Jackson Powers. That just tells you how big Jackson is. But Cedric feels like a big guy on the football field, maybe bigger than his listed weight. What did you think about watching the tape with Mr. Van Pran?
Well, I'll tell you, this guy's stock has been falling lately, and I don't really know why. It's a little bit confusing to me. When the year started, he was generally considered to be about a second-round pick. The aggregate has him falling to the mid-third now, and I don't really know what happened. Like, he didn't have an amazing year, but he had a year where he improved on his 2022 play. He allowed 0 sacks and 0 hits. Now, it's Georgia. They obviously have a big talent advantage in almost every game they play, but had a really good year protecting the quarterback. He's got a lot of experience starting for a premier program where you do occasionally go against the best of the best. Georgia plays teams like LSU, so he's dealing with guys like Mekhi Wingo and Jordan Jefferson. He has to play a team like Alabama, so he's going up against Justin Igbogbi and guys like that. So good footwork in his pass sets. He's got good footwork. He's got great hand usage in the pass and the run. I really like his hand placement. He has a really good understanding of that stuff. He's got a great latch. Once he gets onto you as a blocker, he doesn't get off you easily. Latches on really nicely. He's got, I don't feel like there's a big weakness here with him as a player. He's got a good mix of strength and agility. So I think he's relatively scheme flexible, scheme versatile. Plays with tenacity. He can peel up and block linebackers at the second level in a zone blocking scheme. And he's another guy who's good at calling out stuff pre-snap, good at calling out blocking schemes and blitzes. So Cedric Van Pran, I think, brings a lot of positive things to the table. He does play upright at times and loses leverage because of it. Sometimes he does this thing, and a lot of offensive linemen do this when they're in college so he can get better, but they bend at the waist when they're trying to make contact because they're so eager to get in on the guy. They bend at the waist, and that causes them to be susceptible to like swim moves and stuff. So you want to keep balance when you're going in, and he's, got to get a little bit better at that. He does have short arms. Maybe that's part of the issue here because that's not something that gets better. His arms are not suddenly going to get longer. His arms are 31 3/8. That's trouble. I don't think he's an ideal zone fit. I think he's a good zone fit. I will say that. But I don't think it's ideal. His testing numbers were just okay overall. But I'm still relatively high on Van Pran. I understand that there are some things with his measurables that are troubling. But I think he's worth a second-round pick to pretty much any team that needs a center.
Yeah, I do have a second-round value grade put on him. I think that the tape wasn't bad this year versus last year, and last year was really solid. He might have been in contention last year, Brennan, to be the best center taken out of the draft if he had gone. He might have gone the highest even over John Michael Schmitz, who had a pretty poor season this year for the Giants. In fact, he outplayed Oluwatimi, at least as far as PFF was concerned. Another guy like Jackson Powers, I think that does provide you some guard potential there to be able to slide in the guard here and there. I wouldn't want to play him there long term, but if you have to fit him in for a couple of games because injuries run you tight, you might be able to. I do love Brendan in my offensive lineman that finish and want to kind of destroy, that I'm looking to get a pancake. I'm not looking to block you. I'm looking to knock you off your feet. And I feel like with Cedric Van Pran, that's something that he has both the power to do it and he has the mentality to then execute it as well. I think to your point on the little bit of the mixed results on his ability to fit into this scheme are the same place I am. I didn't quite maybe like as much as you did in the way he moved out in space. I thought that he's mobile enough to do it. He doesn't look comfortable doing it, and he doesn't look sure of himself doing it. And he oftentimes gets himself in bad positions on the second level block where then his big, powerful hands end up having to correct things. And it can often get him out of trouble. It can bail him out. The problem comes back, though, again, to, well, his arms aren't super long, so he has to be pretty close in that climb to the second level or pulling back in space to get into the place to, fix it if they start to get around him a little bit. I did think he's better as a run blocker than a pass protector. I think the strong guys he can neutralize with ease in pass protection. I think the twitchy guys, when they're running stunts, when they're running blitzes, that's when you're going to see him getting in a bit of trouble as far as just he'll start this way. And you talked about the sinking of the hips. That's what happens is he's one of those guys where it starts to sink and he goes this way. and the stunt comes back or a late blitz comes this way, and then he's got to get those feet back over there, and that's where that movement ability kind of comes and goes with him a little bit, where it's not as pure as it is with some of the other players that we'll look at here, where there's some parts of it that's good, there's some parts of it where you can definitely feel him a little bit, I feel like, labored. Not that he doesn't have it in his ability, you just don't see it show up consistently. Just a bit of a tentativeness when he moved. But at the point of attack, Brendan, when he's making quick blocks right off the snap, going mano a mano, he can take a nose tackle and he can put that guy on a ride. He doesn't need help. He's kind of an unusual center in that way. Jackson Powers is the same way, I think, but the centers don't tend to be that way. You tend to have to usually give him a little bit of help on those run blocking through the A gap, get him up on that nose. So I like his upside. Second round guy to me, as far as I see on him, in 2 years of really good production out there in Georgia. Regardless of the talent around him, he's still got to play in the SEC. That's a hell of a challenge for that kid on a weekly basis.
Yeah. The sinking of the hips would be a really good name for like an autobiography for an offensive lineman.
I was going to say a rock band, but that works as well.
Yeah, the sinking of the hips. I like that. I would definitely go with that.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, the short arms are concerning, but I still think he's about a second round pick. And I think he's relatively scheme flexible. I think he'll be fine in zone, fine in gap. It's not ideal for either, but I think it'll be fine. I think he'll be better in zone than JPJ.
Yeah, he's got a little more movement than he does, a little more ability to just get out to the spot. I think just pure getting to the spot, from point A to point B. So I like the upside with Van Pran. I don't think there's a star upside to him, but a solid league starter is what you'd be able to get here, probably late second round, maybe even early third. And that's not exciting. That's not going to excite the fan base, Brennan, but that's a solid way to start to build an offensive lineup. Right. Next guy, let's take a look here, is the third I've got on my list, which is going to be Zach Frazier. Mm-hmm. I want to see what you think about. What do you think about my comp down there on Mr. Frazier?
That I could see that. And, we're definitely going to have to be a little bit cautious here evaluating him there, because my initial assessment of Zach Frazier was that he belongs in a gap scheme, which is what I thought of Creed Humphrey. And now we know not so much.
I thought you were going to say we have to be cautious because we're going to trigger the fan base.
Yeah. So West Virginia, 23 years old, pretty good size, big hands, by the way, almost 11-inch hands. Only did the bench press reps at the combine, which makes me think he knows he would have scored poorly on the agility and movement drills. Big boards pretty much all put him in the second round, and the aggregate has him in the second. 2 pretty good years at West Virginia. The protection numbers are not nearly as good as like Van Pran or JPJ, but they're fine. One thing I like about him is that he's kind of stocky and short, which helps in the leverage game. Like it's really easy to get underneath the pads when you're that short. He's really, really strong. He's got like that Mountain West strength to him. He plays like a guy who you would expect a West Virginia offensive lineman to play. Drives defenders off the ball. He's got the strength to just like drive block. He's a great finisher as well. Doesn't stop till the whistle blows. He's cerebral in understanding how to pick up twists and stunts. He's good with his hands. So good prospect. I have a feeling he's going to get whistled for a lot of holding penalties in the NFL with the way he plays. Gets a little bit grabby when he loses his fundamentals. His arms are still a little bit on the shorter side. Not as short as Van Pran, but still not ideal. Speed rushers can beat him. And based on what we saw at West Virginia, I don't think he's going to be a great zone fit. So I think he's good. I think he's worth like the late second round pick. I'm just not sure if it would be worth it here in the Ryan Grubb, Scott Huff offense. But, we've said that before with your player comp, and now we're here. So who knows? But what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. Note the 3 cone on him, to your point about trying to hide something with the numbers. These are his pro day numbers, Brendan, so not the combine numbers. But take a look at that 3 cone really quickly, and I'm going to bounce over to this. And then take a look at that 3 cone.
Yep, we have a problem.
Well, Houston, we have a problem. He's actually got Van Pran beat, or they're very close up on the shuttle, Brendan. But the 3 cone, you go, ooh, okay. I see where the hiding is at. You had extra time to work on that 3 cone past 2-3 weeks past the combine, and you still kicked out the 7.85. And that's what shows up on tape with him. I did the Creed Humphrey because, like you said, that was a bit of the problem that we had with Creed Humphrey. That it was part of our assessment at the time. We thought the Hawks were moving to more mobile-based linemen, which they didn't really go to make that movement. Not really. They kind of did. And we were worried that this guy wouldn't be that kind of guy to be able to do it that time because he was going to kind of post this similar stuff. I think he's like Creed. They both have that wrestling background. I think this guy's an all pro wrestling, all state kind of guy. I think when you talk about getting in trouble for the holds, it's part of what it's the double-edged sword of also probably part of what helps him win, because he utilizes that great strength. And then it's a torque game for him where the guy can overpower him and get a win. And the guy starts to seem like he's going to slide off him, and especially in pass protection. And then he can kind of torque his body without having leverage or maybe even his feet in the right place. And he's just got that natural kind of core strength where he can still kind of keep the guy in front of him for enough time to regather his feet, get himself back, set up. He's got that Creed Humphrey kind of, I think, pure strength there that shows up time and time again, where he can withstand in one-on-ones in pass pro and be really solid there. 11th highest graded center by PFF. So another guy well graded last year. I think his feet are heavy as hell. I don't think he has snappy movements at all. I think this completely prevents him from being a fit into our scheme, in my opinion. He can hit reach blocks pretty well. So he has some of that mobile based stuff to that he can do a little bit, like Van Pran's like that a little bit too, where it's like, that's where they're best if you're going to have a move, but don't ask him to get to climb the second level. Don't ask him to pull in space. He has especially a problem to me of keeping his feet in space. He ends up off of his feet when he's got to get into those second level blocks. You can't deny the strength, man. He's going to take a nose tackle on a ride one-on-one. He can hit those combo blocks, and you're going to get movement at the point of attack if that's what you're asking him to do. But you come back to this guy, and as much as I have him as a third round value, because I just think he's a little less clean than those first two guys we looked at. There's just a little less. It's a little foggier to me. And with Creed, you had to do that, like, okay, just rely on that tape for some of those numbers that you're looking at. But I just come back to, whereas I can't pound the table as hard for this guy, I guess, Brendan, as I could pound it for Creed. And looking at the tape, I think Creed was a little more clean in his pass protection. You could rely on him a little bit more in those moments, whereas this guy, there are some times where guys will just kind of slide off his block if he can't torque him up like that.
Yeah. I would put the late second round grade on him personally, but again, not here. I don't think his pass protection is all that clean either. I think speed rushers do get to him. He's not that that's going to come up a huge percentage of the time when you're playing center, right? It's not like he's left tackle out there getting beat by every speed rusher out there. But I'd say
you have to work around it though.
Yeah.
And teams are that's the problem too in this modern NFL, Brendan, is that teams like Mike McDonald's systems are starting to get built to be able to target this type of stuff, because no longer is it I can count on just a front four that I'm looking at. What happens when I start getting stacked boxes? What happens when it's a twitchy linebacker that can pass rush inside against me, an Ivan Pace type with Minnesota that they're going to blitz to the moon? How do I deal with that? And I think a guy like Ivan Pace, who even gives up all the poundage he does to a guy like Frazier, he's going to have issues if that guy's delay blitzing or attacking from one side to the next post snap and really challenging that lateral movement ability. It's the part that worries me about Frazier. It doesn't negate me him as a prospect, but I do think it is a little bit worrisome for him as far as looking at that upside.
Yeah. I'm not in love with it either, but I do think at this point, I do think that a gap scheme will be very happy with him.
Yeah, I think he'll still find a way. He's going to settle into a career a little bit like Jackson Powers, though, to me, where it's get him into the right one. Don't force feed him because you love him so much as a player. I get this, getting the starry eyes and dreamy eyes at a certain guy and going, ooh, here we go. But if he's not quite that fit, or he's really not that fit, don't stretch yourself on that type of guy. Just, pivot a different direction. And that's part of why, Brendan, I think that John, looking at these centers in this draft, because this will be a bit of a common theme you'll hear from us in this draft with some of these guys, folks. This was probably what set John up in the first place to make sure he had the center position at the very least on lock, if he doesn't find the guy that is that fit, where he goes, it just didn't work out in the draft, but at least I'm good for another year. We can peel back to it a year from now and try to figure something out, especially after having a little bit more knowledge on Olu Fashanu.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I want to be clear. I don't have a problem with this team deciding to let it fly with Olu Fashanu in 2024. You can't fix everything at once. You can't put a super duper blue chipper in every single hole in one off season. So if that's the way they go, I'm not going to be upset about it.
And I do think Olu Fashanu fits to this offense on top of that. You're not forcing him in on this. I think he is a fit to this. That's what he does at his best on his college tape. So still love the possibility Olu Fashanu just slides in to be that guy. All right, let's keep it moving here. And I think you would agree at this point, we're starting to get into a little bit of a drop off of talent at the position here quickly. This is
Yeah.
to your earlier point in regards at the top of this about this class.
Yeah, I suspect those three guys are the only three who are going to go in the top 100.
I would second. I would second that. I don't believe we're going to get any more after that, and there'll be a wide variance of opinion on probably the rest of these guys and where they exactly should fit. Let's start out with this kid out of Miami, Matt Lee, a 6'4", 300-pounder with 32-inch long arms. So checks the boxes theoretically here, Brendan, on the surface of it of what we're looking for in our lineman prototype, kind of right around that 300 mark. So you can still move a little bit. Seems to test okay. What were your thoughts there on Mr. Matt Lee?
Good athlete for his size, holds up really well in pass protection. Over the last 2 years, he's allowed 0 sacks, 1 QB hit, 7 hurries. So really, really good pass protection numbers. He's got more strength than you would expect. I think he's got good strength. He's good at maintaining blocks. He's got the good latch. When he gets on somebody, he doesn't let go easily. Really good contact balance. He's somebody who can like take the impact and not get knocked off balance. Understands how to use his hands, and I think he's a smart player on the field. I think he's a high IQ. It is worth noting that shortly before the combine, he was weighed at like 288 and then gained 13 pounds right before the combine. So who knows how he did that, but it might not be something that we want him to replicate. It might be something where he shows up to rookie minicamp and he's 285. I don't know.
That's that's a lot of water weight, man. That's a lot of jugs of water you're chugging right there, I guess, making that happen.
I feel like bull rushes really eat him up. He's got short arms and he doesn't use leverage well, so you can bull rush the crap out of him. He's not a mover. He's not going to drive block anybody out in the run game, which for a center is not the end of the world because they usually do duo blocks and combo blocks, but he's not going to like drive block anybody out. And while he's pretty good on the move, he does struggle to finish blocking at that second level. Like he'll get up to the guy and then just miss, or the guy will slide right off him. So I don't think he's a very good move blocker at this point in time. So he's got some things to work out of his game. I'm just a little bit concerned about his size if he needed to work that hard just to get up to 301 pounds. So I'd say I put like a 5th round grade on him. Not too excited. 5th round grade for me.
Yeah, this is a guy that is absolutely not fitting with all NFL teams. The point you made about him being able to not really drive as much at the point of attack and run blocking is where the big issues land. I mean, he's a pass blocking center is really if you want to summate him, that's where it is. Pass blocking center. And even then, the bull rush still does have a tendency to get into him. But I do believe that he can do all of the movement-based stuff. He can get out in space. He can clear. He's obviously a fantastic, I think, one of the better pass protecting centers in this draft. And if you're going to run a spread system, having a pass protecting center is not the worst thing to have necessarily, where a lot of the blocks you have might get executed and won off the back of appearing to be a play action pass or appearing to be a pass play pre-snap that turns into a run play post-snap. There's a lot of that in Grubb's offense, in my opinion, where everything looks like it's a pass and then it just goes to a run because he set things up so nice for the run game in that way. I think that's how he helped that run game out so much. And it's a place where I think Matt Lee can then get by. He's a good duo blocker and all of that, but you're right, man, anything one-on-one, it's just not happening. And the bull rush thing I had on my notes as well. He's giving up, obviously, it's 30, 40 pounds every time, and you're feeling that where he's getting walked back and there's not a lot he can do about it. He's given all he can at that point. But if he gets isolated one-on-one with a nose tackle, it's going to be a bit of a tough road for him. But I did think he could be a league average center in this league if you put him into a spread-based system. That doesn't mean he's not without some holes in his game to me, Brendan, but I did think that was worth a 4th round grade with that type of upside to it. I think just those scheme is the only one he could do that in. I don't think it's all NFL schemes. But he was asked to do a lot of stuff. Mario Cristobal doesn't have the most elaborate of offenses, right? He can have sometimes that, trying to make him do sometimes some pro things. So I think he's had some dips and measures and having to do some things some of the other centers in this draft haven't necessarily had to do in the type of offenses they're running. But I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind him in our attack in a 4th round for what he brings.
Okay, sounds good to me.
All right, let's move up to another guy I was maybe a little bit higher on than you might have been too. I'm not sure on this one. I know he's not looking really bright on a lot of people's boards necessarily. I couldn't get any testing numbers for him, unfortunately. Another guy I have in the 4th round here, and that would be Nick Samac. And what were your thoughts on Mr. Samac?
I didn't look at him a ton. I feel like he's a guy who plays technically sound, fundamentally sound. understands things like hand placement. He understands how to keep in good form when he's hitting seal blocks and base blocks. He looks pretty good as like a pull blocker, a lead blocker. But I don't think the specimen here physically is all that stellar. He's not very explosive. He doesn't have any drive blocking abilities. He doesn't have that kind of strength. I think that he gets beaten into he can get beaten by like a lengthy player because he's got decent arm length, but it's not great. And I feel like nose tackles are going to eat his lunch. Like true nose tackles in the NFL are going to beat him up. So I thought he was all right. I think he'd be a decent fit for a move blocking scheme. I will say that. So if you want to kick the tires on him in like the 5th or 6th round, I'm down with that, but not crazy enthusiastic about it.
It's fair enough. As I was leading with, I'm probably a little bit higher on him. I do think he's a run blocking center who moves really well in space at the forefront. I mean, that's his forte. As you mentioned about him being a puller, I think he's deadly. He gets not only out into space to where he's got to hit the block, he also finds the target and hits it with a sense of purpose. And to me, just watching these guys through years and scouting them, so many can kind of do one or two of those things, but they can't kind of complete the move, or they can't get to the spot. But if they do get to the spot, they'll land the block. At the point of attack, I think he's got grown man strength. He generates push, whether one-on-one or in combo blocking. I don't think his feet move quite as well laterally in pass pro, and I think that's the main detriment to his game. As you get him in pass pro and he just gets more, he feels more immobile when you're having him set up. And if there's anything going lateral, it's just going to be a problem for him. You are with Michigan State getting a lot of run blocking. Remember them being back in the day, Brendan, that team that had the, Kenneth Walker with their approach. They're very run heavy in what they do. He's a 3-year starter there. So he's got a lot of that background I like too. He's played a lot of football. I did think even though he had the slow feet, he still handled the blitzers and stunters well. So the feet thing is a proper worry, but if he actually seems to deal with it okay, I didn't give him as hard of a black mark on it. But I didn't see a lot of huge holes in this guy's game other than just the technique. Hand-wise, get a little sloppy. Sometimes his feet don't come with him. Sometimes the lateral feels a little slow movement-wise, but I didn't see him getting bull rushed a ton. Admittedly, again, Michigan State doesn't give you a lot of pass reps. It's not littered in there where there's throwing the ball over the field, so you don't get a lot of him setting up in pass pro. But the movement-based stuff is stuff what I'm locking in on as much as anything else. And I felt like he did all that at a really, really nice level. Again, maybe some guys got some similarities even to, he's not the pass protector Matt Lee is, but the movement and space stuff and hitting those kind of blocks stood out to me and allowed me to put him in the 4th round at that point.
Yeah, I just think the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak, so I can't go too high on it. But, 5th or 6th round would be cool by me.
Very close. We got a very close assessment of it. All right, let's go to the next guy, a very big, powerful man out of Arkansas. Razorbacks, very powerful man, guy that a lot of Hawk fans I've heard hot to trot on. And this would be Bo Kimmer, the center out of from the Razorbacks.
Is it Kimmer or Limmer?
Is it Limmer? Do I have it written down wrong?
I think it's Bo Limmer.
I probably wrote it down wrong. My bad.
All right. Yeah, but Bo Limmer, Arkansas, and he plays the way you would expect an Arkansas offensive lineman to play for the most part, I think. Cranked out 39 bench press reps, which was almost a record for his position. 99th percentile. Not a bad athlete either, by the way. He killed the vert. He jumped almost 37 inches, 9'2" broad. So, I mean, he's not a bad athlete either. He's not somebody who just plays in the phone booth. He's somebody who is capable of leaving the phone booth. 2 pretty good seasons for Arkansas, although it should be noted he's allowed 7 sacks combined over the last 2 years, so it's not the clean record of like a JPJ. But he's going up against top competition at Arkansas. Arkansas is not a big-time program right now, but they play the big-time program, so you're playing the best of the best. Offers some guard flexibility, I think. I think you could move him to guard and get by for a little bit. Good pre-snap and good post-snap. He's a high IQ player, understands angles really well. He generates really good drive in the run game, phenomenal strength and very explosive. And I actually think he's pretty capable at the second level throwing blocks. Capable. I'm not going to go over the top with it. I don't think he's very smooth moving in space. It doesn't look quite right. He doesn't look totally comfortable doing it. He's also slow off the snap. His time going from snap to stance is a little bit too long. His pass protection fundamentals are just a little bit weak with things like hand placement and footwork and lateral movement and stuff like that. He doesn't mirror all that well. So I'm inclined to believe he will be better in a gap scheme, but I also think there is some scheme flexibility here. And as a overall prospect, I'd say round 4. I'm down for it anytime in day 3.
Well, we're definitely landing in the vinyl spot, our outlook of him as it basically purely stands, where I do see him about a middle 4th round guy. Boy, he's a real wide body center too. Just naturally, just seems to have that extra kind of width to him. I do think he's a run blocking center. And when you talk about coming to a spread scheme and you got real issues as far as pass protection, which you just highlighted and which I think I would tend to agree with, his pass sets mirroring the guys in front of him, he struggles with that. He goes left, he goes right, he goes left, and like he went left, he doesn't get back to the right, and then the guys, past him. And so a guy like Byron Murphy, for instance, up front would just, destroy this guy if you get a match one-on-one with him, because he'd have no ability to stay in front of him at all. And I know that's a 3-tech, but this is what I'm saying. Teams will target these kind of players if they can figure it out in this modern age. It's the way that the game, I think, is changing a little bit defensively, where you can't just run and hide from that. I can't deny his power, Brendan. And one of the things I really like about him is in combo blocks to the peel to the second level. That's where, as you said, there's some things that he can do movement based. He hits the reach blocks really well. That hits that initial combo block, gets to the second level and neutralizes the linebacker, hits it accurately, gets his hands striking in the right place, and that power comes and shows up. If you have him pull back across the formation, or you just have him purely pull off the line of scrimmage to go at the linebacker, where he doesn't get to take advantage of the middle linebacker taking a couple steps up, then he's going to have a big potential to lose those kind of blocks. So we have 2 big problems for me with him fitting into the Hawks scheme, where I don't have as much of a feel that he's going to be outside of that, as you said, put it the gap integrity side, where you can go to more of a different schemes, because both you have the issue of holding up in pass protection, and then you have the issue of he can do kind of some of the mobile based blocks, but I know there's certain ones I don't want him to ask to do it all. I would not ask this guy to pull back out in front as the formation and get out, laterally like that. I don't think he's going to have the speed or foot quickness to get there. And at least not what I saw on tape. I think he's more of a guy, and that's why Arkansas asked him to do so much of the snaps with him, Brendan, more than any other center in this draft, in my opinion, were combo block, peel, combo block, peel. That's what a majority of the snaps were with him, with what I watched on tape. And that's, to me, an indication a little bit of Arkansas acknowledging a little bit of why they're keeping him in that sort of straight line spot, where they're not asking him to pull a whole bunch and get back over across the scheme.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I just lost my lights. Hold on. Sorry.
Oh, shoot. Wild.
It's catastrophe over here, Brendan.
Was there an earthquake over there? I don't know. There have been some earthquakes around the world these days.
Post-eclipse stuff going on over here.
But yeah, interesting player. Probably not really a fit here. But objectively speaking, in a vacuum, I put like a 4th round grade on him. He does have some things that are great, but there are some big holes here that probably don't get fixed.
And I do the 4th round too. Put him in the right scheme, put him in a place where he has I think if you reduce down the number of pass reps he's got to have over the course of the game, or set up in your blocking scheme to have a lot of him doing just combo blocks, and you can man up with your other offensive linemen, then you can find a fit for him here. But it needs to go to the right one. Just not quite the fit here. All right, let's go to the next guy I've got up here on my list. This is a kid out of LSU named Charles Turner. Posted some okay scores overall, nothing great. What were your outlook on Charles Turner?
I like his aggressiveness. I like the way he plays. I like the mentality he brings. It's never good when you're leading off with something like that, by the way, when you're talking about a prospect. Just going to say that. Understands hand placement really well. He hangs with the more athletic rushers out there. Like he can hang with an athletic 3-tech. I think his latch is nice and strong. He's got lower body strength as well to hold up against bull rushes. And unlike a lot of the centers we've looked at today, long arms, 34-inch arms. So that's going to help. But I feel like his technique is just kind of sloppy when it comes to things like punches, when it comes to things like footwork, when it comes to things like lateral agility. And he doesn't pick up twists and blitzes very well. I think that stuff confuses him. I think the more complex pressure packages will get to him a little bit. He'll lose his balance against a true pass rusher. Like if you sick a 3-tech who really knows how to actually rush the passer on him and actually has moves in his bag, he's going to just get beat up. And I don't think he's got any flexibility to play any position other than center. So fairly well balanced. He's got a little bit of this, a little bit of that. He's got some overall kind of stuff that I like. But I also kind of feel like the level of competition rising from college to the NFL is going to kill him, because I don't think he's good enough at anything, right? Like, I don't think he's really strong in any area. So I had 7th round pick on him.
Ooh, Brendan dropping him. I did like him a little bit better. I do think I'm going to end up landing with right about the 5th round for him when it's all said and done. I think he is another in this draft that's a pass protecting center and not much of a run blocking center, and that there's a very stark difference between those two as far as stark difference between those two. In his abilities. As a pass protector, I think he is really nice. He sinks those hips in. He keeps his hands active. You mentioned the athletic pass rushers that he can neutralize. I would add on top of that he's also good with the technicians, that those guys that are fighting, he does such a good job of both keeping his feet, always kind of motorboating with those big tree trunk legs that he has. And then he also has got that kind of, you know how sumos, when they're doing the sumo move, have that kind of doon, 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 where they're constantly doing this recorrection of their hands, you know? He's got a little bit of that going on with him, where he's always keeping the hands, and that's what helps him, you know, when they're doing those chops. Okay, you get your hands chopped. Can you get your hands back up there active into the state to recorrect, you know, get the hands back into the chest and then sink back down? He does it really naturally, you know. He's kind of that, you know, you see those karate guys doing that move thing, like he can always kind of keep coming back up, where even if you knock those hands down, even if you get a little bit of a win, he's got the ability to recover on a rep and get back into it with that hand fighting and the feet moving at the same time. It's both of those two that really worked together for me when I was watching him, and it was unique for him as a player versus some of the others that I've seen. I think it's part of what helped to keep Jaden Daniels clean at times out there when he was asked to do it. Now, as a run blocker, it's just he's not getting any push to me at all. I don't think I can trust him a whole hell of a lot to move into space. He's not the most athletic at all in that regard of things. I think if you put him into a pass happy attack, Brendan, like maybe a Miami attack, you know, that this would be a guy who could maybe find his way into starting in this league. But I do think it's going to be an uphill battle, being that I had originally a 4th round grade. I think I dropped him now here into the sort of the more the 5th round territory in the last, as we've been kind of prepping for the show the last couple of days, just taking that final look at him. Because you got to kind of that measuring stick a little bit as you keep coming back to these guys a bit. So
yeah,
that's where I sort of land on him.
Yeah, it's possible when I make my final big board, I have him a little bit higher, but I wasn't hot to trot on Turner. Just seems to me the kind of guy who isn't good enough in any one area to survive the jump from the college to the NFL.
I'll tell you, as the run blocking thing, that certainly is valid outlook on it, because even when he's combo blocking, most of these guys, like some of the big dogs we've talked about, when they're combo blocking, you know, they're going to shatter a guy's rib. They're going to help that guard next to them take that player and get him moving. And even if it's just a couple of yards. And with this guy, it doesn't matter whether he's doing that or he's just going one-on-one with a guy heads up. There's no movement as the run blocking goes. And to have that as far as the empty spot, no matter what you bring as a pass protector, is a little bit of a tough skill to just be completely missing from your bag, even in this modern pass happy league that we now find ourselves existing in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
All right. So I've got a 5th on him. Got the last couple of guys I've got here in my own board on the 4th round still. And this is the guy right here, Brendan, that has stood out to me as maybe one of the ones that might end up being the most interesting of guys or being what I would call the most purified skill set fit for the given scheme that we are putting into place. Am I off my rocker when having the outlook of Tanner Bortolini being the guy that is the most pure? Now, I'm not talking about how good he is a player, Brendan. You're going to give me that breakdown here, okay? So I'm not talking about how good is he a player. I'm talking about the skills I bring in my bag of mobility, and every play you have in your playbook, I can execute with my skill set as good as any player in this draft. Is that a fair thing to say about him? or am I just getting too caught up in the testing numbers?
I mean, he might be these might be the best testing numbers ever for a center, honestly. Like this combination of like a 4.9 4.40, 1.69 10-yard split, 4.28 20-yard shuttle. This is historic. This is like it's like the Vince McMahon meme where he keeps getting more and more excited. It's crazy. The three cone actually might be the greatest three cone of any interior offensive lineman prospect ever. I was looking at this earlier. There might have been one that was better, but you don't get better than this. This guy is a once in a lifetime center athlete.
To give again to Brendan's context on this, the 7.163 cone, go back to Cedric Van Pran, just give you guys the context, 7.463 cone. And we're talking about, these are, though it's only a small testing number of 8 seconds. So that's a wide disparity, I'm trying to say, I guess, Brendan, and to your point on that.
Yeah, and Van Prance was not bad. That's not a bad three cone for a center.
No, not at all. Not at all.
So he might be able to play a little bit of guard as well in the NFL, so you're getting that little bit of flexibility. He maximizes his somewhat limited strength pretty well. I think he finds ways to use angles and use fundamentally sound technique to maximize what he can get out of it. Really good at throwing combo blocks, great understanding of how to throw combo blocks. He's got a surprising amount of leg drive as well, got a surprising ability to actually use leg drive to push guys out of the way. I don't know if it's going to work in the NFL, honestly, but in college it worked a little bit. And there's no doubt about it. I mean, he's going to be a great scheme fit. That's the headline here. That needs to be the leader here. Going to be a great fit for what you're doing in a zone blocking scheme. Now, he doesn't have the strength to handle nose tackles head on. So when there are going to be certain matchups where you're just going to have to find a way to mitigate it. Even though he's a great athlete, I think his lateral movement doesn't look all that great. I think his lateral movement is a little bit sluggish. He is another one of these guys who gets off balance and bends at the waist sometimes. You got to keep balance. You can't be bending at the waist when you're trying to get into contact with the lineman. And he doesn't sink his hips either. He's got to sink his hips. Got to be able to play with leverage. So he's got a lot to learn, right? There's a lot of rawness here. There's a lot of stuff he's got to work on. And, these testing numbers are just screaming, take me in the third round. Take me in the third round. Feels like a little bit of a sucker thing, though. I can't do it. I'm going to wait for the fourth round with him, but I would go fourth round. I think that's fair. I think that's reasonable.
This is one of those type of players, Brendan. I think you'd say it's fair enough that you can make. This is where that scenario you just posed. That's to me that's at the sort of head of the issue, or the head of the conundrum when looking at the value versus need argument. Late third round, you go, boy, but we don't know if he'll be there in the late fourth. We don't know if he'll be there. And boy, we just like him as that pure athletic fit. But that drives you to pick him for need in the third round versus what might be there of a different player at a different position of better value, right? Versus getting him into that fourth round where you go, that's amazing value. That's great value to grab a toy, or not maybe amazing, but that's really strong value to get a player like this at that point. Would you agree there?
Yeah. I mean, the upside is pretty enormous here. Like, there is a scenario where he becomes Jason Kelsey. There is a scenario where he becomes that center that is so different from every other center. I had a friend who was an Eagles fan who once compared Jason Kelsey to like Stephen Curry, because when Stephen Curry came into the league and started doing the stuff he was doing, he completely changed the way defenses had to play him because they had never seen anything like that. They had never seen anybody like that before. And in its own way, it was a Curry-like effect with Kelsey, because he was so athletic at the center position. Defenses were like, how do we deal with this? This is weird. Bortolini could maybe be that. So I think if you wait for the fourth round, you're getting that's fair value for a guy with this kind of upside.
I agree. I think your assessment's pretty fair. I think there's the little place I might disagree just to a degree is that I think he does a good job of consistently getting the early leverage wins on plays. His difficulty sometimes, especially when he's around the line of scrimmage, not doing the movement-based stuff, he'll get the early leverage wins. Sometimes he has an inability to sometimes sustain the blocks for a long period of time, but he does tend to me to get the early wins. I just love the way he moved to the second level with ease and fluidity. I don't think his targeting systems are always accurate. He's got some whiffs out there when he's asked to move in space that he's going to need to clean up at the second level, but you can, I think, clean it up. As you said, he's not a road grader. This is not a guy you're going to match up in the run game and say, take on a nose tackle and send him for a ride. He's going to need to hit more reach blocks, shield blocks, use him in space as much as humanly possible. But again, I think your accurate assessment of it was pretty succinct in that this is the player that he provides you and could be, and this is the upside that he could give you. And you could say, well, if he's got the Kelce comp, you should go higher. But it's like, Kelce was what, a 5th, 6th round pick when he came out. So it's also a guy that maybe is, you could say, has been harmed in his draft status, Brendan, by the fact that he's been asked to play 5 positions at Wisconsin and just kind of at the end settling down into maybe that center position, which is maybe his best long-term, but a guy who I think also can play for you with that versatility and background, some guard snaps. And unlike some of the other guys we've talked about in this center class, can actually come in and start for you at center. If you need him to start for you at guard for a year, Brendan, I think he might be able to do that for you in his skill set, especially being such a pure fit to the scheme.
Yeah. I give him a chance to do guard flexibility as well, which made me boost him up a little bit. But, I just don't want to, I compare him to Jason Kelce, but understand Kelce was, very much a lottery ticket that just happened to win. So I don't want to think that just any center that can move like this, he can do what Jason Kelce did. That's not true.
Yeah. No,
so be careful.
I would go full on comp. I think that's where I like to go before, because some people go, well, that's the comp you're making. It's like there's shades of it, right? There's shades of that here. You would never try to go as far as to say he's got Hall of Fame potential. There's some shades of this kind of player in this guy's game that I can see that fits to our scheme, which is going to maximize that to the utmost. Yeah. And that's the part to get really excited about with that to me.
Yeah. Maybe he's not Steph Curry, but maybe he's Dame Lillard,
Yeah. Which, hey, Dame ain't bad, we get a rangy center, Brennan, a rangy center. He can block you. He can block you from any spot on the court.
I love it.
All right, let's move on here to my final 4th round center that I have in this class. And this is a kid out of Michigan. Seattle could go double dip on Michigan centers in back-to-back years. This is another undersized guy, a little bit for the position, but he had a real tremendous year of production for Michigan from this spot. And a good player that's got some stuff that fits to this scheme. Brendan, where do you stand on Mr. Drake Nugent?
Well, you're going to have to sell me on this one because I did look at him and I don't know. I didn't get the impression that, although it could be like an Olu Fashanu-like thing, right? From my perception, I don't think he's got the agility to be able to hit moving targets. So you might have to sell me a little bit on this one. Now, he does have familial roots in football. I think his father was a football player. So he's got the blue blood stuff going on. He's got strength. He can handle bull rushers. He's got good technique, played a good amount in college, has good punch power. Leverage battle is good because he's only 6'1.5". Like that's great to win the leverage battle. You want to be the short man, but didn't test very well. In my impression was he doesn't have the agility to hit moving targets. I think pass rushers are going to be a challenge for him to handle. So I wasn't really feeling this one. Did you get a different perception on this one?
Well, I do have a late 4th round grade, and that's right on the edge of the 5th to me with him. So he's, to me, on the line with it. I think you're not off in your outlook of him. I don't see anything necessarily different. Strikes me a little bit is that the Michigan and what they asked from their centers to do on 2-year basis from last year with Olu Fashanu to what they're asking from Nugent, it's weird that they just are doing 2 different things. So much of what Olu Fashanu was doing on tape was movement based. I mean, everything to a very extreme degree. And with Nugent, it's very much him doing more of the traditional center stuff, combo blocking, occasionally blocking man-on-man one, and just sort of staying in the phone booth, so to speak, is what they're really asking him to do. The power is what gets him there to me to the 4th round. I think he can do some stuff where he drives guys off the ball one-on-one. I think he really does a good job of neutralizing single gappers. He's got quick reactions. So when guys shoot a gap, he hits them on them and he'll ride them right out of the pocket and they're gone out of the play. He's really adept at it and feeling at it. You're not going to 2-gap him because you can't powerfully control him. Like you said, he's got not only the leverage win that he gets, but he's got the power. It's one thing to have the natural leverage, but you don't have the power with it. Your leverage gets kind of neutralized to a degree, one point or another, but he's got enough of that power to sustain a block and push it through and stay up underneath you, and you can't do much about it. I do think you're right about some of the twitchy stuff, athleticism, challenge stuff. You're not going to need him to be moving in space. But where I did put these grades were more from where I saw it from the NFL perspective than just from a Seahawk fit here, and to look at it from where I think they're going to go in the NFL and where their proper place would go in the NFL with the skills that they are bringing. Because I think Drake can start for an NFL team in this league. He's going to give you right around league average to below league average range of play, which I know doesn't sound like great value, but I think you can feel like you're getting it very quickly once you bring him in the door. And that's on a cheap rookie deal that's on a 4th round contract. That's where the value is there's not, to me, a tantalizing upside to him as far as his ceiling, but I think he gives you the quick floor fast, and the floor there solidly enough gets you by at the position if you need to, if you're building up in other areas. But yeah, I just thought that power to me was legitimate with him.
Yeah, I mean, if I were running a gap-based scheme, I would have been okay with like a 5th or 6th round pick, but for the Seahawks, I don't see it personally, so.
I wouldn't put him here with the Seattle as far as the fit here. No, I don't think that that's going to be the right. He just doesn't move well enough in space to make it happen. And again, you see this stark difference sometimes by the way the coaches are running their schemes, Brendan, by the way that they're doing what they're doing, it instructs you a lot by, what that player can and cannot do. You have 1 year where Olatimi is pulling out in space here, climbing to the second level here, hitting this reach block there. And that's in a 3 successive play session. And you have this guy, play after play combo, nose tackle. And you're going, okay, they're definitely trying to keep him into kind of more of a bit of a box in what they're asking him to do versus Oluwatimi to me, just a little bit. But I think his run blocking, put him into another one of those. I know I go to this a lot because I think they're kind of, they don't need as much out of their linemen so they can get by as long as you bring this thing. He goes to the Niners with this skill set that he has, and that's a team to me that could be like, well, we like that because we know he's going to go down, especially the way the Niners have leaned on power recently. This is kind of player is going to be very nice for them from that fit style of it, I think. So some team like that, I think, looks at him in the 4th round through that vein of things.
I could see it.
So I have a couple other guys here on my list here. Did you have a chance to look at Dylan McMahon out of North Carolina State?
Yes, I did. Dylan McMahon, NC State, the Wolfpack.
The Wolfpack. So Dylan, a guy I was late to on the party with this one, Brendan, but he's got some interesting things to him. Give me your breakdown on Mr. McMahon.
Fantastic athlete. Those testing numbers are pretty gold, especially the 3-cone and 20-yard shuttle that tells you his change of direction skills are on point. He's a natural moving in space, absolute natural. Uses his hands well in pass protection, understands things like hand placement and when to throw punches, high football IQ as far as centers go, has a lot of starting experience in college. He is sub 300 pounds, so we're starting to push it a little bit here. I don't think it's untenable, but he is small. He's got short arms, 31 3/4. That's tough. Bull rushers are going to eat his lunch. So there are some issues here, but I think he's a great fit for what we're trying to do offensively. I think he's going to have to add a little bit of muscle, which means he will lose a little bit of his agility because that's just the trade-off that you make. If you're going to add 5 pounds in muscle, you're going to lose a little bit of your speed. But I think he needs it to survive in the NFL. I'd throw him up in about the 5th round personally. I like it.
Yeah, he's a guy right 4th, 5th round for me too. Early 5th round, I think I'd go. I did like a lot of what I saw from him, Brendan. I think you're right about the fact that he's not going to give you the pure grip strength to lock in on guys and just control things. The thing he did nice that was kind of his little super skill to me was he would do a good job of taking that power, absorbing it, and then redirecting it. Like I'm getting overwhelmed by it. I can't withstand this. This is kind of backing me up if I don't do something different, and then find some way to sort of just position his feet, twist his body, and then ride it to the direction he wants to ride it out of the play. Does that make sense? Like he knows the run play is riding this way. He gets the power. So he goes, okay, power, I'll point you this way, and then I'll guide my feet and I'll go. And he gets this sort of defensive tackle to kind of take the cheese because they feel like they're getting penetration. You know what I mean? Like they're like, I'm winning. He's giving up ground to me. I know I'm winning here. And he sort of is smart in like being able to get away with the power guys, kind of get that off the hook. And I like that about him because the mobile-based guys, I think, Brendan, are always to a degree going to have an issue there against the power guys. It's the simple nature of the beast. You have to pick your poison. Do I want the sub 300-pound guy that can move in space, or do I want the 325-pound guy that can maul guys at the point of attack. This is why I think we got ourselves in trouble in recent years, is that we're trying to find that split in between spot with some of the guys we've been putting out there, like a Damian Lewis type or a Phil Haynes type, where they don't have the movement-based stuff to do it. Yeah, they might be bigger boys up front that can kind of handle things at the point of attack, but they can't get out there and move in space really. So you've got to look for those guys, and hopefully then they've got some counter ability in their skill set there to handle then those stronger, beefier guys. But he's not, I think is, going to be a maul guy at the point of attack in the run game. He's more of a help defender, pull in space defender. I do think he's got kind of an equally strong game as far as being a pass pro or in pass protection or as a run blocker, Brendan. I thought that he was on both sides of it really well. But, just on the downside of it, he's got some whiffs on his tape as well, like Tanner Bortolini did. When he doesn't do that absorb contact and route it in the right way, that's when it goes wrong, right? So he usually can get them to, but sometimes they are routed the wrong direction and it's going right to where the play is going. And it looks like he's been beefed up on the block and completely lost the rep, which he has. It's a fair assessment of things when that occurs. So I did put him as a fifth round guy, but I also found him to be kind of an unusual center in this draft and a guy that would maybe a really, really great fit in for this scheme.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You can't go too wrong when you're picking guys this athletic. He could be like the Reek Woolen of centers, right? Super good athlete, not a ton of great production. Maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't.
That's right. You got a high bust rate, high upside rate, but the upside's just as readily present there as potentially that kind of maybe, not bust factor in the fifth round, but not going to accomplish their upside. Let's call it that in the fifth round. Mm-hmm. Let's go to the last guy I've got here on my list for centers that I had a chance to scout. I had one other guy I'd mentioned to you that we haven't gotten to yet, but we'll get to that guy in a second here. This is Bryce Foster out of Texas A&M. I couldn't find any testing numbers for Bryce. Did you have a chance to take a look at him?
Very little here. I do think he's a good scheme fit based on what I saw. I think he's a smooth mover, but I didn't have a lot about him. He was somebody who slipped through my radar here. So you take lead on this one.
He's a bigger center than you normally see. He just takes up a tremendous amount of space in the position. You want to keep him in kind of a small corridor to keep him effective, and getting him outside the corridor, the more further you do, the less effective he gets. He's got a lot of nice pure power for the position, which is part of the benefit of keeping him in that corridor is you keep him up on nose tackles and let him just, get to work. He's really good and smart in his combo blocking. He can peel off and get the second level. That's the one place where he can do a little bit of movement, but I would say anything else, even reach blocks, are a no-go place with Bryce, in my opinion. He's much more comfortable taking on nose tackles than three techs and pass protection. Pass protection can be an issue where guys just find a way around him. And there can be some really ugly reps there where they find their way around him. I think the worst part for me on tape with him was when pulling in space, he's got a two-pronged problem when he's pulling in space. He can neither accurately strike the defender, and then he also has a high tendency to end up off of his feet. Some of these guys at over 300 pounds, Brendan, you have them start to run a lot or move out in space a lot. There's a high tendency in them to just stumble and fall over their feet, say nothing of not even being able to land their block. And I saw too much of that with Bryce Foster. He's a seventh round guy to me. I do not think he is a fit. I think a fringe NFL player. Are you muted?
My bad. Sounds good to me. I can dig it.
Well, who else did you have on your list of remaining guys?
Did you have a chance to look at Andrew Rame of Oklahoma at all?
I did not have quite a chance to get to him.
Yeah, he had the worst testing I've ever seen, so I didn't spend a lot of time on this one. Ran a 1.94 10-yard split. 1.94. So that's hard.
5'4", 240.
Yeah. I think his mirror is pretty good. I think he plays with a tenacity. He looks the part. He's got NFL caliber size. Fundamentally sound in pass protection, but doesn't cover a lot of space. Not a very good athlete. He's out of control a lot, ends up on the ground a lot, doesn't have consistency. So he's a mauler. He's basically a pure mauler. I imagine some gap scheme team is going to want him in like the late part of day 3, but I'm not interested in him at all. And the only other guy I looked at was Kingsley Eguakun. Florida. Did you see him at all?
Good job on the pronunciation, by the way.
Yeah, I don't know if that's correct or not, but it looks right.
That's got to be right. If that's not right, it deserves to be right. I couldn't find any testing numbers on him, but I did get that. Well, I got the 26 reps he did, I think, at the bench at the combine. I did get anything else in there though.
Yeah, got a nice latch. He's got powerful hands, engages well in pass protection, and he's capable in space. So there is some stuff here that I didn't mind, but he doesn't play with leverage, needs to sink his hips. Bull rushers beat him because he doesn't have enough strength to anchor against them. His anchor is not very strong. He in space, he's got some balance issues, so it's not great, right? He's okay moving in space. Let's not get too crazy here. But I could see him as like a 6th round pick, especially if you think he can play a little bit at guard, but I wouldn't go higher than that.
Okay. Yeah, just didn't quite myself get to him. I'm gonna see him before draft day, but just didn't quite a chance to bump over to him on that side of it. Well, that's about the last we got. I had one other one myself that I looked at. Just a pass blocking center, another guy that's not necessarily a big mover in space. I'm not going to give it a lot of time. Just if this guy shows up, it's just more of a pass blocking guy. Doesn't give you a lot of the run blocking. He got 28 reps on the bench, which was pretty nice on that side of it. But he really offers almost nothing as a run blocker. He's really wide. He's got some length. This is Nick Garguglio. Boy, this draft I think sets the record, Brendan, for tough tongue twisting names. I'll tell you what. I'm going to call him Nick G. Sorry. 7.33 3-cone, which was all right there from his side of things. He shows off a little bit of fluidity moving in space. I mean, he's really good about picking up blitzers and stunters and guys trying to move and get him going lateral. He's got a good mirror step to him. Just another one of those guys where there's a real diverse difference between what they do really well to what they do bad. And to me, that just kind of knocks him down more into that 6th, 7th round range of things because of that.
Right. Yeah, I haven't even heard of him. I got nothing there. Not a thing. So I'm gonna have to trust your judgment on that one.
Yeah, he's Spencer Rattler's basically Spencer Rattler's center out there, and they did a lot of passing, so he had a lot of pass pro reps. Looks good there, but it's rough and run blocking with him. All right, well, that's the centers, folks, in this draft as it's aligned. It's not a deep group. There's not a lot of names in this draft, and again, you can see why maybe just they're not. Well, there's a decent amount of guys we went through, but maybe that you've got to make sure you're set and taken care of going into this, because we could certainly see Brendan with these centers, because there's not as many really good upper tier level ones, that there is maybe a bit of run that you see on them in that first, at least first 4 rounds. You might get to the 4th round and there's nobody left just by the need more than, or the demand more than there being by the supply.
Yeah, my feeling is that if you're going to take a center in this class, you should be getting somebody like Bortolini or McMahon for the upper level zone scheme potential. And you shouldn't be trying to hit it to get like your blue chipper, because it doesn't make sense to me to attack it that way.
Me either, because the blue chippers aren't quite the pure fit they need to be for you to make that kind of move and take that kind of approach. Well, we're going to slide. We've comboed this show up a little bit, folks, and we're going to do this in a specific way. And that is that we want to make sure that we're concentrating on what our Seahawks are going to be doing. That's the point of this, is to look at this through the outlook of not only the players in this draft, but what the Hawks are going to do. And so we're going to kind of put both the center and the tackle show together here. And we're going to be very specific as far as in regards to the tackles. We're going to look at the top guys in the first round of this draft, because it's worthy of discussion there, no doubt about it. But then as we move forward here on these other last couple of guys beyond that, we're going to be very specific in targeting those guys that we have a good amount of feel for are looking to be moved to guard, or that there's a lot of push for them to maybe move to guard, especially for those teams who want to have a mobile-based guy. This is what a lot of teams have done in recent years that have these kind of schemes, is you bounce a guy out from tackle into guard, because you're getting that mobility now that you can draw upon that's very hard to find at the interior offensive line position with the prospects coming out. There's just not as many really upper tier level athletes at the position. And so you've got to try to find a way, because otherwise your scheme's not going to work. If you can't find a guy with this, you got to make it happen there. So we're going to go through a couple of these guys. Let's start at the top, Brendan. And this is going to be my number 1 left tackle in this draft. I think a top 5 player in this draft, in my opinion of things. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I think we've talked a little bit about him, but what are your thoughts currently as it stands on Joe Alt?
Well, all right. So I've done the left tackle work pretty recently, so I've had a chance to look at Alt quite a bit. I definitely agree with him being a top 5 guy. It took a while for it to become evident, but he is the best tackle in this class for sure, I think. For most of the year, Fashanu was number 1, but kind of in the last, I'd say, month, and then post-draft stuff, Alt just has ascended. So Notre Dame 21, only 21, by the way, and that's a big deal. It means that he can get better. It's easier to imagine him getting better at some of the things he's not so great at. He's got right tackle size with left tackle athleticism. That's how I would put it. He's got the size of like one of the, he's got like, you know, those guys the Patriots would use as their right tackle these last couple of years, the
Trent
monsters. Brown. Yeah, Trent Brown types. He's 6'9", but he's got that left tackle athleticism. Last 2 years, his numbers are phenomenal. 2 years of elite production at left tackle. His father was an offensive lineman as well. I think he's a former first-round pick of the Chiefs from Iowa. So he's got the blue blood thing going. He moves.
Ring of Honor. Ring of Honor in the Chiefs.
Really? Okay. I knew he was great in college. I wasn't sure if he was great in the NFL, but that's pretty strong. You can't beat that.
No, sir.
Mm-hmm. Fluid mover when shuffling laterally, athletic enough to play in space. Very quick going from snap to stance as an edge rusher. It's really hard to get a step on him around the corner because he rockets up into his stance so quickly. High football IQ when picking up complex pressure packages. He can handle speed rushers and power rushers equally well. So he is bringing so much stuff that you want from your left tackle here. I think his punches need to be improved a little bit. I think he's a work in progress on his punches. Sometimes he loses balance when he's trying to engage with a lineman. He does bend at the waist a little bit. And he's so tall, you worry about leverage a bit as well. Got to sink the hips. For him especially, it's really important that he finds a way to sink the hips. But I think those things are all pretty fixable. He's only 21, right? Like he's definitely going to get better in some of these areas. He might even get a little bit bigger. Who knows? But yeah, top 5 pick all day. Not quite, you know, he's not a generational left tackle, but I would put him up there with the typical top left tackle that you see in any given draft, you know, like the Eric Fisher, the DeBrickashaw Ferguson. Pretty much every year has that superstar left tackle prospect, and I think he's that guy, and he fits right in with them.
Yeah, I think the final part you said, especially about that, is that's where I see him as a player too, where this is your atypical best left tackle in the draft that you get coming down the line, and I think a pretty safe player for where his floor is going to lie, minimum, with that upside that still remains, being he is still so young. Do you like my Andre Whitworth comp? Are you buying that?
Yeah, that's pretty good. I can buy it.
Okay.
It's pretty good. Was Whitworth 6'9"? Was he up there?
6'8".
Wow. Okay. For some reason,
that's the part you didn't know. You didn't think he was, though, because it's the that's why I made the comp, is because I think you thought he was probably smaller because he moved so well at that size, right? Like he just naturally, Whitworth looked like a pretty smooth mover, but you wouldn't have thought. And that's the thing with Joe, is that you look at him and go, man, 6'9", but he doesn't move like a 6'9" guy on the football field. And he's got some even kind of finesse elements that he can bring to the table, like you talked about. The flip side of that being, as well as what you talked about, being that he's got to get stronger and more powerful, more able to, you know, use those long arms and strike out there and drive guys back. I think that's going to come with time, especially considering his pedigree and the father with his background, and because he is so young. But this is an easy one, Brendan. This guy was, you turn the tape on and you can just see the upside that's there. You can see the flashes of what he's going to give you. And that power is going to come with time. This is a franchise left tackle, and if you make this pick on draft day, you have taken mighty big steps towards having a successful draft just off the back of this first pick.
Yeah, and I not that you would want to do this in all likelihood. He could also probably play on the right side because he's so big and strong.
Yep. Well, we saw the Lions did it with Penny a few years ago. I didn't like seeing it, but they've been very successful getting away with it with Penny Sewell and moving him over to the right, where I thought he was a pure left guy too, but they've made it work. So you're right. I think you could do that with him as well if you wanted to. He'll work either way. Though I think they did have him. I think there was a big kerfuffle, Brendan, about them running him through the right tackle drills at the combine, and he looked like super. Now that I remember, like he looked super awkward doing it. I guess so.
I must have missed that. Huh.
Something I heard about that was, well, the only reason it stands out to me because people were like bagging on him for it, because people were like, it was a normal draft pundit talking about it, like, oh man, what's this going to do for his value? And it's like, hey, you know, a-hole, he's going to be a left tackle. He's a franchise left tackle. You know what I mean? Like, what do you mean? Was it like, oh, because he can't play on the right side, it's going to do anything to dip his value in the least? So people were kind of knocking on the guy for having the take. That's why it stands out to me a little bit when they were mentioning it. But who knows if it was anything really to it? Could have been BS.
Yeah.
Let's go to the, I guess, still probably the guy that would be, universally speaking, considered probably the number 2 left tackle in this draft. I think that there is some contention on this one by some pundits and outlets. But a guy who was looked at as maybe the guy who was going to be the number 1 left tackle coming into this draft a year ago, still went on and had a pretty solid season. So it's back-to-back couple of years of really good play out there at Penn State. A guy that if you're looking to do a Madden build a creator, there's kind of 2 tackles, or maybe alt fits into that too a little bit. And I'll make my guy 6'9". So there's probably 3 left. There's 3 tackles in this draft that are kind of Madden creative player types, Brendan. Which, who do you think my third one is, by the way?
Is it Latham?
The other one.
Mims?
Yeah, Mims.
Okay.
That's the one. But what are your thoughts on Fashanu?
Well, I'll tell you, his stock has fallen off pretty hard over the last couple of months here. And it wasn't necessarily anything that happened on the field. He allowed all of 10 hurries, 0 hits, 0 sacks last year. But now half the big boards have him outside the top half of the first round. And the aggregate has him 15th. So right near the middle, actually right near our pick, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I never would have guessed this guy would be anywhere near number 16 overall back when the college football season started. He's got the size. He's got long arms. Small hands. Is that what we're worried about here? Are we like, oh, he can't throw the football because his hands are too small? I don't know. His testing was overall fine. Yeah. His testing was pretty good. High effort player, always giving effort. Strong lower body, really hard to push him around. He roots down and anchors really well. He's got the mobility to play in space and block moving targets. He did that at Penn State. He's got a great mirror for pass rushers as well. You're not going to be able to beat him to the edge with speed all that often. He's got great footwork, and he's really good at using his punches to take control of the rep. Honestly, I think a lot of his weaknesses are very similar to the weaknesses that Alt has. He doesn't use leverage that well. He doesn't sink his hips. He needs to be able to sink his hips to be able to win leverage battles. He's not going to generate a ton of movement on drive blocks. He doesn't have that kind of strength. And one thing that I noticed, most of his QB pressures that he allowed, he like, you know what oversetting is, right? You overset when you're protecting against speed, and then they just get the inside on you. He gives up the inside because he was scrambling so hard to get outside to beat your speed that some guys are just going to be able to throw the inside move on him there, and it's tough. But honestly, I looked at him and I was pretty impressed. I was like, he's not as good as Alt, because Alt is more of a specimen physically and what he can do athletically. But Fashanu, I think, is right around 9 or 10 on my big board. I still like him a little bit more than where most people are right now.
Yeah, I think your assessment's fairly fair. I think when it comes to the mirroring ability, I'd offer that kind of comes and goes, snap in and snap out, and that his feet have a tendency to get lazy. And when his feet has a tendency to get lazy, he tries to over rely upon his length. So you mentioned about oversetting, and to me, that's a symptom of the fact that he has an issue with twitchy guys to the edge. So he's oversetting to try to correct that, because what he'll try to tend to do with those twitchy guys is just allow for his arms to be the thing that ends up pushing them out the back of the pocket, where he rounds them out. But if they're too fast, if they're too quick, he can't get there in time to round them out that back of the pocket, and he ends up in trouble. So there's just some times where there's a little bit of laziness there on that footwork and pass protection where it's not as clean to me as it was with Alt. I think you mentioned about the finesse kind of stuff that he brings into play, like Alt, completely on point. That's completely true. I think Alt did a better job of showing moments of pure power. Alt did a better job of moving guys off the line of scrimmage in the running game. To me, with Fashanu, it was more of the stalemates occurring again and again, where, okay, I'm not allowing penetration, but I'm not getting any push either. Nothing is happening here or occurring on the other side of it. He needs to get stronger. He needs to get less reliant on just that arm length. The leverage stuff you mentioned is also something that came up to me in my eyes. And it's, again, it's all back to just kind of relying on those super long 34-inch arms. Now, to his credit, he knows how to use those arms. He knows how to use them at an extension length with power and really can put it on guys. But it's too much without the rest of the stuff coming together. And I think if I've got to draft a guy and still put some things together in your game, still kind of fix a lot of different holes along the, not big holes, but holes nonetheless, then that's going to drop you for me a little bit in the first round. And it's put him behind Troy Fautanu, because I think Fautanu is cleaner in his overall game and what he's bringing to play.
Yeah, I still see some pretty upper level potential here with Fashanu. A lot of these things can be fixed, and granted, you'd rather go in with a guy who's already clean, but Fashanu's 21. He should be able to improve in these areas. It's not like we're talking about a 24-year-old guy who's a relatively finished product. So I don't know. I'd like him a little bit more than most people at this point, and I'd say he's still top 10 for me, not top 5 anymore, but I alt's better. Alt's better. I agree. And I don't know. I'm just a little bit surprised that his stock is fading the way it is. At this rate, he's going to barely be in the first round by the time we get to the draft.
And we're not far apart. I have him probably top 16, 17. So it's a matter of like 6-player difference. Do you have him as a blue chip player in this draft?
Probably. I can't imagine him not being a quality left tackle. Maybe he won't be elite, but I think he'll be good. And I think he does have like star upside, maybe not superstar upside. So I would say yes.
Okay.
Like that being said, if he's there at 16, I don't know if I would take him because I don't know what we would do with him. I don't know how that would work, right?
I can't think that he's going to be able to kick into guard. People have raised the subject to me about Charles Cross moving to guard, but I don't think that that would work either. So I think that what you're more looking for that to happen then is that you hopefully have a team that's hot to trot to move up, who thinks they're getting the number one left tackle in the draft, because some team will have maybe that assessment you do of this is the best left tackle in this. We like him better than Alt, and they're willing to move up to go get him at that point, to get him at 16. That's your probably best case if he's sitting there at 16 than necessarily drafting him, because I think you're on a pickle by picking him.
Right.
All right, let's go to the last left tackle first round pick in this draft that I've got on my board here, and that's going to be Troy Fautanu, UW's own riser up the boards throughout this pre-draft process, and what he's done and how he tested and how he looked at the combine. Really loved his tape. This kid would be a magnificent fit for our Seattle Seahawks, Brendan. No doubt about that. He's coming from Ben Grubb's offense. Hard to question the fit, right? When he's literally coming from the same offense. You've seen him a lot. You've watched him for a good period of time. You cover the Huskies every single week, live stream the games. Troy Fautanu. What are our bottom line thoughts on him?
Well, Fautanu really got some buzz going with that combine, right? Like he was getting a little bit of buzz coming out of the college football season. Great year that he had, but that combine really got people ready to go on him. So you're looking at a phenomenal athlete for somebody who, now at this point, I mean, it's kind of implied with the title of this show, is going to end up playing tackle. He would certainly prefer to play tackle in the NFL. I'll put it to you that way because they make more money. And I think that some team out there is going to value him as a tackle. So I don't think there's any stopping him being gone in the top 15. I'll put it that way. Somebody's going to see that and be like, I want a piece of that. Should also be able to play some right tackle as well, I think. He's got great footwork. He plays well in space, plays great pulling across the line, good latch, maintains his blocks really well. Guys don't slip off of him. He mirrors really well. He's powerful. I don't think his hand placement is ideal. He's got some stuff to clean up there. He's got long arms, 34 and a half. I it's this weird thing where it didn't feel like it was that long watching it. Like he doesn't get the most out of his arms yet.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to have to help him out a little bit here.
And 34 and a half, gigantic. Like that
that
should be looking like, go gadget arms on the football field.
Sometimes he bends at the waist because he's too aggressive trying to engage. So this is an interesting one. It's also worth noting he's playing in an offense that prides itself on getting the ball out quickly. Mm-hmm. And yet he's actually given up quite a bit over the last couple of years in pass protection. Last year, he allowed 23 quarterback pressures total. And the year before that, it was 15, which is actually a pretty significant amount when you consider that Ryan Grubb offense runs all those screens, all those quick passes. I know they do deep stuff as well. It's still a little bit like, why are these numbers so high? Like Jordan Morgan has better numbers than this playing for Arizona, and that's an offense that plays a little more normally, right? So it's a little troubling.
Yeah, I mean it's spread based, it's spread to spread. I think that you sort of explained a little bit of why I think the issues come up with why he's got more pressures. Number one, the Huskies tend to want to throw the rock as much as anything, so there's gonna be a lot of passing attempts, maybe a few more pass protection attempts than your average team out there is running, which is going to get him. I'd like to know what his pressure rates stack up, for instance, Brendan, versus the other left tackles in the sport. Who might have had way less snaps, and is the pressure rates commensurate with them? I would argue that's probably the case of what you would come to find. The thing you mentioned about the second part of that has to come back into play is that Grubb sped this himself. 1 in 8 plays, I'm looking to take a shot play. 1 in 8 plays, he's going to ask his quarterback to go back on probably a 7-step drop, long developing play. And that's what you have to do if you're taking a shot play. You don't take a shot play on a 3-step drop. You take a shot play on long developing plays. So if that's the case, that means your offensive linemen have to hold up then longer in those continual plays. Now, does that mean normally you have your spread stuff going and they aren't protected on those? Certainly they are, Brendan. But then there's 1/8 of those snaps on those pass pros where you're not protected. And so if you have a high volume of passes and then 1/8 of your pass protections are going to be those long developing plays, maybe more of a chance that you're going to be put in a position of giving up a pressure or two through that time, especially because they didn't do a lot of helping him either. It's not a lot of chip blocks or double teams out there. They had their tight ends tending to run out into space, post snap a lot when they wanted to get a lot of guys out in their routes, basically, is what a lot Grubb would do. So I love his game, Brendan. He's got this one rep on tape where he makes this pass pro block where he hits the guy initially and the guy beats him then around the edge. And he's so quick enough that he flips his hips, does a spin move, and comes back and resets at the back end of the arc of the pocket, catching the man before he can get back to Penix, resets his feet, anchors down, and holds the rep. And not holds in a bad like holding, but just perfectly executed, hands inside. He's just so athletic. I think he's maybe the most athletic lineman in this draft, or one of the most athletic linemen in draft on tape. I know Tanner Bortolini's got all that movement he showed, but just on tape with Troy, he gives it to you in everything you can want, and you can pull him in space, give him to the second level. But as you said at the top, I don't think he's getting to the guard like many Hawk fans are hoping. I think this is a guy that's going to be taken as left tackle. I think he's honestly probably the potentially second left tackle taken off the board. Even if he's not, he's the third. I had him going. I just ran a 32-team mock draft yesterday, Brendan. I had him going to the Jets at 10. And that's with Fashanu going to Chicago at 9. So I look at the Jets. They got that old guy they signed from the Cowboys at left tackle, right? Tyrion Smith. And so you're like, man, we cannot have Rodgers face down another season of bad line play. And with Fautanu, now you have insurance then for that guy over at the left side, and you have a guy who can slide into left guard if their injuries pop up there as well.
Yeah, I think Fatanu's like a middle first round guy. I don't know about the top 10. I couldn't quite get there. Got a couple question marks here. I mean, there's a reason why I was evaluating him as a guard for a lot of this season. Like, there are some holes here. And I do think Fashanu's a little bit better of a tackle prospect, but middle first round. And I would definitely be willing to take him if he's there and move him to guard, because I think he could do that. I think he'll be fine there. I don't think it's
certainly
something where like he can't do it, but yeah, it's always an interesting thing with these offensive linemen because it's so hard to evaluate where they end up, and that changes their value dramatically.
It does. It absolutely does. And part of my outlook on it is just what I'm hearing too from pro circles about where he may go in this, not beyond just my own outlook, is just you're hearing more and more that he's got a very high potential to go in those top 15 picks. Jay Stern, thank you for becoming a new member of the channel. I'm not sure if that's yours or mine, but thank you either way on that. Kevin Mullen, thank you for the $2 donation. Says, is it upsetting if the Hawks go Fautanu and Rosengarten 16 and 81?
I think Rosengarten's hard to justify. Fautanu, sure, but Rosengarten, I don't know if I can get behind that one anymore.
Yeah, I think the Rosengarten gets shut down with the fan signing. You've decided you've already we're not going over to right tackle here at this point, or that we trust enough in that selection to get by at it. The Fautanu one works fine because you can move him to guard, and he'll be I agree with Brendan's assessment. I think that he fits into guard very nicely. He sinks his hip, he wins leverage, he gets low naturally from the left tackle position in a way. It's part of why I think we kind of outlooked him early on as a left guard guy that would transition there, is just because of how he does get so low into guys naturally, whereas those tackles tend to play a little bit higher in their sets and whatnot. But Fautanu would be fine for me at 16, but Rosengarten, I think you know, he's not going to get on the field at that point. You know, unless you got a collection of injuries. And so you've kind of blown your 3rd round pick on a guy that you don't know when you're going to have a pathway to him getting onto the field. It'd be good value at Rosengarten at 81, but I just don't think you want to triple down on that. And that's why we're not going to, Kevin, too deep into the tackles in this stream, because it just, the numbers game of the roster doesn't allow you to have 5 tackles on a roster, especially, you know, drafting one really high to be the 5th guy on the roster. It's teams just can't afford to, assets are too light, too lean to pull it off.
I like Rosengarten, though. I will say that. I like him.
I do too, Kevin. I think he's going to start in this league and start a right tackle or maybe even left tackle potentially, because Fautanu was holding it down at UW over there. So I do like what Rosengarten brings as a 3rd round guy, but just don't think he's going to find his way over there. Let's flip it on over here to the right tackle side, unless you had another left tackle that you had on your list as far as a.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's just one of those things where the left tackles are the guys who make the most money. So if you're capable of playing left tackle, you're not going to want to play anywhere else. So it's hard to find guys who could realistically be viewed as candidates to bump over, I think. So it gets a little bit short around here. I'm taking a look at it.
Well, what I was going to look at first, just the right tackles, the 1st round right tackles, really quick. Then we'll look at.
Okay. I see what you're saying. Okay, yeah, let's do
just
that.
A couple. Yeah, we just got the 3. We're going to take a look here. So Taliese Fuaga, right tackle. A guy that I think we should talk about, Brendan, is a guy that 6'6", 324. He's a big dog, but maybe a guy you could look at as between him and Lucas, one of those two being willing to move to guard. I'm not saying that that's what you would do with him, but maybe a guy that somebody they'd be in consideration of that. What were your thoughts out of with Fuaga?
I'm impressed for the most part. He's 6'6", so I don't think him moving to guard is a non-starter. So I think it's at least worth having that conversation. Pretty long arms, tested fairly well. Really good explosiveness in his lower body. Let's see here. 0 sacks allowed over the last 2 years. He's got a great mirror in pass protection. He's a really good pass protector. Plays with a very aggressive mentality. Understands hand placement really well. Operates pretty well in space. Powerful punches on defensive linemen. Uses his punches to halt momentum really well. Might be able to play guard in the NFL. I wrote that down as well. So there is some stuff here. He does need to learn how to sink his hips, especially if he moves to guard. He's going to have to learn how to play with a little more leverage. Doesn't have a super strong latch in the run game. Sometimes I think he lays a block in the run game and then lets the guy go. Lateral quickness, little bit lacking. Sometimes it feels like he loses balance. And I think the speediest of the speedy edge rushers are going to give him some trouble. But he's got a real technical wizardry in pass protection. And just looking at him, he looks like he should be a physically dominant run blocker. I don't think he's there yet. He could get there. I don't know what his best position is going to be in the NFL, but I suspect wherever he lands, he's going to be a great one. So I put a middle 1st round grade on Fuaga.
Yeah, he's one of my blue chip players in this draft. Lightning quick out of his stance. I thought he showed dominant traits both as a pass and as a run blocker. When he moves in space, he moves smoothly. I'll give you that he's not, purely athletic, but he is explosive and he gets to the spot very fast. It stood out to me that he just arrives really quickly to the place for his size. And he doesn't look like a guy 6'6" on a football field. He moves like a guy maybe 6'3", 6'4". It's kind of how he moves. I found him to be a little bit better, I think, in the run game than you did, where I found it when in the reps I was watching, he was road grading guys right and left. He was getting to space blocks and hitting those pretty well. Again, though, your thoughts that there's some little bit of athletic limitations, I think that's still fair because that's a little bit on there. I loved his kick step, smooth kick step, quick pitter patter steps, gets into his pack set so fast, hard to get around off of that. As you say, he's just a technical marvel in a lot of ways in what he brings to the table. I think it's not maybe a perfect game, but I do see Pro Bowl potential in this guy playing from the right side and maybe some potential within him to be able to kick into guard, right or left guard, and be able to hold up really well there. So really a player that one of those guys to me in this draft, and it's not all of these guys, very few of them fight this way, Brendan, but he was a guy that you really quickly turned on the tape for some of the prospects I looked at and went, okay, yeah, there's a difference making setting on this particular cat. There's something a little bit different with him. Oh, you're muted.
I'm sorry. I keep doing that tonight. My bad.
You're good. No worries.
Yeah. Yeah, there is. He is probably my favorite of the pure right tackle prospects in this draft. I will say that. It's
Mine too.
close. They're all pretty well bunched up, but
Agreed.
Fuaga, I think, will land somewhere and be great. I just don't know what position he washes out at ultimately.
Fair enough. It's fair enough. Well, let's move to the next guy. We got right tackle. This guy I have is a first round grade. Another guy that I do have put on a blue chip grade onto him at this point. And not started a lot of games, Brendan. There's a risk in this kid. This is not a one you make as far as like, oh, you got all these years of production and all that. But you do have a hell of a year of production that you did get from him. And that's going to be Amarius Mims from Georgia.
Yeah, this is kind of the guy in this draft that makes all other human beings look really small. Like he's the guy that people take the pictures of. They're like, this is a normal looking person standing next to Amarius Mims. Look at how he looks. 6'8", 340, 36 and an 1/8 inch arms. Those are some of the longest arms I've seen during my time doing this draft stuff. 11 and a quarter inch hands. Biggest hands I've seen in this class so far, by the way.
36 inch arms. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, and he runs a 5.07 40. So his top speed, not that as an offensive lineman, you run a 40-yard dash all that often on a football field. Let's be real here. But he can move too. And the big boards all pretty much put him in the first round. He's played a grand total of, I want to say, 700 snaps over the last 2 years. And that represents most of his playing experience so far. Allowed all of 0 sacks and 0 QB hits in that time, though. So he is playing well. This is not just a testing guy. This is not just the underwear Olympic captain. This is a guy who has played well. Really big, really long, just really, that's where the conversation starts. But I got to tell you, he understands how to sink his hips, I think. He is the low man a lot. He wins leverage battles. He's got great hands. He's got big hands, and he knows how to use them. Shows some potential as a move blocker. I think he's got a chance. He's agile enough to recover against speed. Even if he gets beat around the corner, he can get back out there to recover. So he's a guy who can kind of get away with being a little bit slow out of his stance because he's so long and so quick. He's able to get out there anyway. He might make it as a left tackle. It wouldn't shock me if he ended up playing a little left tackle. I think he'll be better on the right side. He's got a really strong punch as well. Now, obviously, you're working from a very small sample size of snaps at Georgia. His latch in the run game isn't as strong as it needs to be. There's the hitting moving target stuff hasn't totally gotten there yet. Sometimes he whiffs. Sometimes the guys slide off him. So playing in space can be a little bit of a struggle. Sometimes he gets caught leaning and lunging, a little bit of technique stuff with the contact. But he's only 21. These things are mostly going to get better. He's that's one thing that I focus a lot on when it comes to these issues. Are they fixable, and how old is the player? Yeah. So he has every bit the potential to be as good as a guy like Fuaga. I like Fuaga a little bit more, but to me, he's another middle first round guy. I would take Mims in the middle first and feel good about it.
Yeah, and you mentioned again 402 pass blocking snaps, 0 sacks allowed, 0 quarterback hits, and only 6 pressures. Which that's with a quarterback starting for the first time out there at Georgia with Stetson Bennett. So they were going through, I think, some of that growing pains out there, and he was holding it down. I think what you talked about, if I was to kind of summarize it up into a little way of where I'm at with a little bit, it's just he's got the things missing in his game from a refinement standpoint that he just needs more time and seasoning with to get those things finished out and rounded out, right? It's stuff that comes, there's a lot of guys in this draft, especially some of the centers we looked at this draft, Brendan, that 3-year, 4-year, 5-year starter where, okay, the natural ability is not as much there, but you see he's had so much seasoning that he just knows and has a knack for understanding how to play the position. And that's just what Mims is missing right now is he just needs, more seasoning. He needs more time out there on that football field to get that better natural feel for how to stay latched on, for the timing of things. But the athleticism and how, he is so athletic. Though you mentioned the bend and he can rotate his hips, and he's just got that ability. It's just, well, you can have him do all the movement and stuff in space, and he's going to be great with that. And he can get to a spot as quick as anybody in this draft from point A to point B once he gets moving. Like you said, though, a little quick out of the stance, but that's another, refinement thing you learn with time, how to get quicker out of your stance. It's not because he's slow. It's just because you feel like he just needs a little bit more time out there to kind of figure it out.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm a fan. I like what I see. I just wonder at 6'8", are you going to be able to play guard? That's tough. So if you can't play guard, then I don't know if it's a viable pick for the Seahawks right now.
It's going to be a hell of a conundrum for John Schneider to be in if this guy does slide, because I think the Hawks will have him likely in one of those places of, if not a grade A grade on him in this draft, is one of the tier 1 guys, very close to that area. And yet it's not that need. It's a little bit like Fuaga would maybe provide the same thing where, man, do we really see him as a guy guard? Because that's what we have to do here. And this is the pick to make because the value is this. But at the same time, we're kind of okay here. But man, that would be, and it's very likely to present itself, Brendan. I think there's one of Fuaga or Mims. There's a good chance one of those two guys is on the board when the Seattle Seahawks pick at 16. All right, let's go to the last guy I've got in the first round for me, a little bit ahead of Mims, because I think that he's just more at his kind of floor, Brendan. I don't think that there's as much the upside there in his game. Kid out of Alabama by the name of J.C. Latham.
J.C. Latham. All right. Another 21-year-old, another guy who can easily improve. If you see anything you don't like, just know that he's got time to fix it. Didn't test, but he's 6'6", 342 pounds, so he's big. 35 1/8 arms, 11-inch hands. 2 years of pretty good play for Alabama. Did get a little bit leaky last year, actually. Allowed 2 sacks, 3 hits, 9 hurries, but nothing terrible. Not only is he big, but he's got the ability to pass protect on the edge. Like, he's not... It doesn't look like somebody who's completely out of place when he's like laterally shuffling to keep up with an edge rusher. Remember, on the right side, you're usually going up against the 5 techs, the guys who are a little bit bigger and stronger. So it's a little bit more okay to be not super agile. He's got a very nice and strong latch when he's engaged. His hands are always working when he's in the middle of a rep to take control. Lots of pop in his punches. His punches stall momentum like crazy. Dominant run blocker. Going to be a dominant run blocker for sure. I think he'll be okay in space, and he's another guy. Maybe he moves to guard. Maybe. 6'6", it's conceivable. I think that his areas of improvement would be reading blitzes and stunts and twists. Again, he's young. That should come. Sometimes he gives up his inside shoulder when he oversets. He's just trying to get too much depth in the pocket, and then he gives up the inside shoulder. Over-aggressive and loses balance. Bends at the waist, trying to make contact. He's never going to be a great player on the move. He's just too big. I don't think he's ever going to be some, Lane Johnson type player moving in space. Mm-hmm. Height does make the guard move dicey, but he's got a ridiculous amount of strength. So much interesting talent here. I'd say middle first round again. Maybe if you're running a zone scheme, you got to hold off until the late first because he's not an ideal fit, but he's going to be really good, I think.
Again, a guy, like you say, not that he's a lot closer, you'd say, to Fuaga and Mims than he's further away. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
My comp for Darnell Wright. You feeling that? Last year's
Darnell
Chicago,
Wright.
Last year Chicago took right tackle in the first round. Tennessee.
I like him a little better than Darnell Wright, but comp wise, I see it.
Okay. I thought the assessment's pretty on point. I didn't feel it as much from him as the run blocker. I thought that he should have been at times on the tape better as a run blocker than what I saw. He wasn't bad at it, but I did see some lack of just pure power that I want to see there at times from him in that spot. And you mentioned the pass protection stuff that did come up a little bit. It's not like it was bad. I mean, that's still the solid part of his game, but that just means there's some bad reps in with all the dominant ones that you get. So that's where I did put him just a little behind these guys, but I do have him, as you do, middle first round guy, a guy who might have that ability to play some of that guard position, I think. And much like with Darnell Wright, I think there's a lot of safety in getting him and know what you're going to get. I don't think there's the star potential to some of the younger guys we talked about in the line today, Brendan, the Jackson Powers Johnson, or there was another kid we were talking about who's 21 in this draft that were like, Joe Alt. He doesn't have the upside to me necessarily of those guys on equivalency. Maybe Jackson Powers, I guess, maybe in that realm, but still a really solid meat and potatoes, perfectly fine first round try to prospect that you should feel perfectly good with your team taking. This guy will help your team out. There's very little bust factor to me to JC Latham.
I agree.
All right. Well, these are the tackles in the first round. So let's move on with the last couple of guys we're going to be looking through here today in this draft. And we're going to specifically now, me and Brendan, going to target in on just a couple of guys that are looked at as being guys that are currently playing tackle at the college level, but due to transition to the inside, they may not have enough length. They may not have enough athleticism. They may just be missing a little size. There's something to them that has a lot of people thinking their more comfortable position at the pro level will be kicked in. And this is way... Yeah. You have to do this now, Brendan, don't you? Because of the fact that it is so hard to find the athletic inside guys, that a lot of teams that call upon athletic linemen inside then take this track of getting college guys that have played on the outside, have that athleticism, and then we'll teach them the skills to the inside.
Yeah, especially in this offense, it's important. It's like going to Home Depot and getting the washer dryer that has the dent in it. Like the dent doesn't affect you at all because you just need something that can wash and dry your clothes. But because of that dent, it's drastically discounted. So
that's right.
Yeah, I would say, if I had to guess, I'd say the ideal would be the Seahawks get a left guard for this offense that played tackle in college because he's more likely to have the mobility that we desire.
Agreed. I think it's not a bad path to go at all. And there's a lot of track record for success. Rams have been doing this for years at times, and it's really worked for them very, very well. Well, the first guy I want to look at here is a second round guy. Some people do see his ability to start as a left tackle, a guy that was coming last year off of an ACL from the previous year, yet still performed really well, even though you know that was not 100%, that knee. It's a kid out the Pac-12, the old now defunct Pac-12 of Jordan Morgan. And but a guy that, to me, you talk about if they get back in the second round and they find a guy that could be a guard for them and who I think was going to have a really outstanding upside as a guard at the next level, Brendan. If he goes there, he may be just good enough to hold on at left tackle. But if he goes to guard, man, I love his upside over there.
Yeah, I think Morgan's good enough to be a left tackle in the NFL. That being said, it would be the Rams move. That would be what the Rams do, right? They would take him to play left guard. He's a really good athlete. Even for a tackle, he's a good athlete. So he would be a phenomenal athlete if you move him inside. 1-7, 10-yard split. Really, really good quickness out of his stance. Very strong punches, has excellent hands. And he's also got enough strength to withstand bull rushers, which is why the move to the inside should work. He's got great footwork when mirroring pass rushers. He's quick out of his stance. And he's proven he can play in space. Arizona did have him on the move sometimes, and he did it well.
That's right.
Some issues with him. Overly aggressive, sometimes bends at the waist when he's trying to make contact. Doesn't sink his hips the way you would like. Needs to, especially if he's going to move inside, he's got to learn how to sink the hips. A little bit of fine tuning on his hand placement when he's engaging with offensive linemen. But I think those are all fixable things, right? I know he's 23, but still, when he gets to the NFL and he's like, oh, the level of competition is this much higher, I got to get more technically sound to pull this off, I think he'll be able to do it. So, yeah, I have him as a early day 2 or late day 1 pick.
Yeah, I've got him as and a guy that teams I think may put him in that day 1 if they think, man, he played that well off the ACL. He'll be even better next year. There's a lot of reason to believe so. And he was a good prospect. He was looked at as a really good prospect before that ACL, as far as where he was heading, as far as his track goes. So outstanding kick step, just great feet in pass protection, Brendan, which to your point might be enough to allow him to remain out there on the left side. I think there's sometimes a little bit of power in the run game missing from out there, but if you put him in the right scheme, like a spread-based scheme and some of the spread-based concepts even Arizona was running out there, I think that fits him a lot better. But you ask him to crawl into the second level, you ask him to pull out in space, reach blocks, any kind of movement-based block he can hit and looks very comfortable doing so. And not only hit it, but hit it with some power and get some drive with it, which stood out to me. So he really, really did some of those blocks at an upper level versus some of the other guys in this draft. I think you might be right where, man, you talk about the left tackles kind of falling off in this draft after you get past the first 3, they very well do. And that may drive this to be one where teams go, okay, well, we're going to we're going to take this guy and slide him on left tackle because this is as good as it's going to get through the rest of this draft, and it's a need for us. And that ends up driving him to become a left tackle. But man, if we get him somehow in the second round, I would be very excited by that pick, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was keeping an eye on him pretty much all season. I watched him a lot anyway because he was a Pac-12 guy. And I kept thinking about him as a guard, but my ultimate conclusion was somebody's going to value him as a left tackle, and that's going to kind of ruin our plans. But at the same time, maybe they won't. Or maybe just the draft will fall in a particular way, right? Like sometimes this stuff is random. Sometimes this stuff is unpredictable. So, yeah, Jordan Morgan moving to left guard, I would be able to get behind that. He is a little bit short with his arms. They are sub 33 inches, so maybe a move inside would help him be even a little better.
That's the one thing I'm thinking with that, is that maybe that's something that allow him to slide in there. And especially if he's in a movement-based thing with the left guard where he's not asked to be as pure powerful at the point of attack, and he can kind of lean on that movement-based stuff. I think that really fit him into this offense. But he's going to be one of those interesting players to see where teams want to kind of position him. And I do think it is hard at left tackle, man, because it's just not a super deep draft for super quality left tackles. So to your point, that may be enough to keep him in that place of things. I want to talk about this guy. I was not initially on watching the tape on this next guy. Brendan is a guy that I saw as being a guard candidate necessarily, but I've heard a lot of him and some people telling me it just goes without granted that he's going to go into guard. So I thought he was worth talking about because maybe he's a potential guy the Hawks are looking at. A guy with an incredible amount of length, almost 35-inch long arms out of Maryland, 6'4". That's Delmar Glaze. Were you reading the same kind of things as far as him being moved inside, or do you see him more as a guy that should be a left-outed tackle, or could the Hawks look to move this guy in?
I had him as a left guard or a low-level right tackle.
Okay.
And why would you be a low-level right tackle when you can be a decent left guard?
That's right.
I don't know. That's a saying somewhere. I think that's in the Bible somewhere.
I think it was.
Yeah.
Leviticus.
Mm-hmm. The thing with him, though, he's got long arms, almost 35 inches.
Yeah.
So that might buy him a little bit of life at the tackle spot, but not super athletic for his position, 5'2", 140, 178, 10-yard split. 2 pretty good seasons, although he has allowed 7 sacks over the last 2 years, which is troubling, but he doesn't have a great quarterback at Maryland. I think they have Tua's brother.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I can't remember his first name, but it's Tua's brother. So looking at Delmar Glaze might offer a little something as a swing tackle on top of being a guard, uses his hands well. He moves pretty well in space. He looks natural and normal, throwing zone scheme blocking, long arms, uses footwork really well to keep balance. He's another one of these guys who seems to overset a lot. He'll be like racing to the edge, trying to get in front of the speed rusher, and then they just flip inside because he overset, which that would go away a little bit if you move him inside, which is why I kind of like that idea. He's not strong enough to really bully defenders, I find, which is a little bit of a concern if you're going to move him inside. And just generally, I thought he was pretty inconsistent. So I felt like a 5th rounder, and then he's your utility man. He's like, oh, he's our emergency left tackle. He's our emergency right tackle, emergency left guard. There's a place in the world for somebody like that.
Absolutely, there is. I did like him a little bit more than you did, though. I do think the negatives you brought up are on point. Run blocking and power edge rushers are the biggest issues in his game, I think, beyond all else. Quick twitch guys, technicians, he can handle those guys all day. But if you get the guy just some pure strong power, that's where he's going to have an issue. And then that translates over the run game where he just can't get any push in the run game. I did think that when he sets up in pass sets, I know he's got the pressure numbers, but overall he's pretty solid back there. To his younger brother will have a tendency at times to hold on and try to extend plays, which, as you know, with linemen, man, you get a quarterback that's going to extend plays, and that's going to tend to cause some more extra pressures for them and extra times where they're giving up sacks where maybe they shouldn't have if the quarterback had been more smarter in their decision making with getting the ball out of their hands. I was just looking at a stat yesterday, Brendan, that I had they came out with that stat. Did you see that stat on quarterbacks and sacks that were on them that were their responsibility? They came out of the NFL from last year.
Yeah, I did see that. That's PFF, right?
I don't know if it was PFF, but it was, I do have it right here still too, so I can bring it up if you want. But it was just from, was it PFF? I think it was, yeah, it was PFF. That's right.
Okay.
Data
Yeah,
from
I've seen
PFF.
that.
So you had Gino around 6%, of course, as far as the total sacks on him percentage wise. And when you looked at a lot of the rest of the chart, it made sense. It added up because, you look at a guy like Russ that was at 23% or 20, or Justin Fields at a high percent, guys that you would think would hold that ball. So there's a little of that with Delmar where he had a little bit of that going on. I just like the upside with him in the movement and hitting those kind of blocks you'd hit in this kind of offense. I hadn't really thought that you'd move necessarily from tackle because he had the long arm length and he tested reasonably well out there, but another guy that I'd be perfectly happy kicking inside. I do have a late third round grade on him because I do trust in his ability to start in this league one way or the other. I think he will become a starter, even if it is at guard. And that's kind of my baseline for whether I go third, fourth, fifth. If I'm in the fifth, it's not for a guy that I think's really got starter potential unless there's some injury problem with him or something, that's come up outside of the control. Maybe, he's got criminal record or something. All right, let's look at the next guy I've got as far as a transition guy on my list, and that's going to be a guy that's actually kind of low, quite frankly, on my board, but a guy that has been given a lot of talk as far as being a guy that's going to be moved nonetheless. So I wanted him to look at him here anyway, and that is not the most mobile of men. He's a big dog. He's got some big low dogs, big tree trunks down there. KT Leveston from Kansas State.
Right. So NFL caliber size for sure. 6'4", 326. He looks more like a guard than a tackle, I gotta say.
Yes, sir.
Right? Like he definitely has the look of a guard. He has the athletic profile of a guard. His testing numbers would look a lot better if he slid inside. Despite the poor testing, I think he is a pretty fluid mover in space. I do think that he is pretty good at moving, despite the fact that he does things a little bit on the slower side. Powerful run blocker. I think he'll be relatively scheme flexible, and I think he might be able to play a little bit at multiple positions. Maybe he'll be an okay right tackle on top of being an okay left guard. Left guard.
Mm-hmm.
Counter moves tend to beat him up in his pass sets. Like he'll get the first move, and then the counter move will be the one that gets him. He gets off balance when he makes contact with defenders. He's another guy who bends at the waist, just loses technique a little bit, and he needs more variety in his sets. Like the great offensive linemen have a lot of different things they can throw at defenders on their pass rushing sets, like different things they do with their hands. And the truly great ones have a big variety so they can keep those guys on their toes, keep them guessing. He needs more variety in his sets. He's also given up a lot of quarterback pressures over the last couple of years. Now, he does not have a quarterback. I think his quarterback was Will Howard, who is not he's not a real quarterback, not really.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say I'm kind of in the 7th round on him. I'm not really feeling the hype. The testing numbers killed it. But I like the tape enough to say he's draftable, but not by much.
Yeah, I think you're right about the whole thing. You first look at him on the field before they start hiking, and you go, "Oh God, this guy's not going to be able to move in space at all." And then you watch Kansas State having him move all over the football field and asking a lot of him to hit those kind of blocks in that offense, and he was able to perform it, even though the testing numbers aren't there to say that he should be able to perform it. So make of that what you will. I think the pass protections issues come up from the reason that he has to change to a guard and get off of tackle, is he just can't handle the twitchy edge rushers out there at his size. He's got big dogs that he has to take a long time to pick up and put down, and he can't move with those guys. And so you just have to kick him inside, no matter what. I did put a 5th round grade on him because the tape says you can move in space. The testing numbers say you can't. So I will always lean a little more heavily to the tape if it's overwhelmingly so that he's performed those blocks. And I felt like he did perform those blocks, Brendan. There's a bit of a spot with him though, where you feel like sometimes he's out there moving on ice when he's moving around with those feet, where it's just like, he's just about to slip and fall almost, he's got a little bit of that going on, but he's got the power to get it done at the point of attack. He can get to become a little bit of a hugger when he loses the rep in pass pro, which I didn't like. But he's just another one of those wide body guys, hard naturally to get around. 34 and 3/8 inch long arms. That's going to transition inside really nicely. I think you take him out of left tackle, move to left guard. He goes from 3 techs from dealing with those twitchy edges, and I think he'll be perfectly fine there. And I think he'll be able to handle this stuff on the movement-based stuff. But again, I wouldn't do it on the early rounds. I do it middle fifth, late fifth. I would keep into that area because there's certainly a big risk that he just doesn't work more than being a backup.
Yeah, I'm a little skeptical about this one, admittedly, but that might just be me being shallow. I look at him and I go,
He doesn't pass the eye test, Brandon. I'll give you that. Okay. He ain't big, he ain't going to set any records for that. You look at it and go, how does this work? But
Yeah.
he makes it happen on the field. That's for sure. All right, let's look at the next guy I've got on my list here, and that's going to be Dominic Puni, Kansas. We go from Kansas State to Kansas. And another guy that I think is going to transition to guard based on my film study of the guy too. And an interesting prospect from my perspective here. What were your thoughts on Dominic?
Yeah, really interesting one. Testing numbers, he was slow, but he's also explosive and he's got great change of direction. That's the takeaway from his testing. So interesting mix. You usually don't see that. Usually the guys who are good in one area are good in most of the areas, but this guy's an interesting mix. Allowed 0 sacks over the last 2 years combined.
Mm-hmm.
He's a really good mover. He's not like really fast in the way that like Joe Alt is fast or Troy Fautanu's fast, but he moves well in space. It's smooth, hits blocks down the field. Great technique with zone blocking. Even though he's playing for Kansas, which is not a big school, he is building a lot of experience against really good edge rushers playing for Kansas because they play a lot of the top guys. Talented pass rush mirror. He's got long arms for an interior lineman. It's like 33 and a half. Always gives maximum effort. And he's also very quick going from snap to stance. Now, his run blocking, I think he's missing some technique with like his hand placement. Height is a problem for him. He loses the leverage battle. Going to have to fix that if he's going to move inside. He's not strong enough to bully defenders in the trenches. I don't think he does a great job maintaining his blocks. He's got kind of a weak latch and kind of a lack of experience. I think he was a 2-year starter at Kansas, and it might not have even been 2 complete years. So I think he's a great fit for his zone-based scheme at left guard. So there will be a little bit of a developmental process because he's going to have to get stronger in order to be able to hang in the middle. But he's got the frame for it. He's like 6'5", 313. He can add a little bit of weight of muscle if he needs to.
Mm-hmm.
So I put I think it was a 3rd round grade on him, and I would be down with that.
Yeah, I have a 3rd round grade on him as well. The mirror ability that you talked about was really as much as anything the one aspect of his game that stood out, and just he can stay with any twitchy guy. He's going to mirror exactly what they do and do it with really fast. And just reaction in general, I think, Brendan, like you also said about light feet, strong base, quick out of his stance, quicker than the guy across from him. Maybe the quickest guy coming out of his stance on his whole offensive line. He's one of those kind of guys, which is a little part you always have to, I think, consider on a guy when it comes to moving in space and hitting those reach blocks. Is the thing that helps out Abraham Lucas a tremendous amount with our Seahawks. Can you get out of your stance faster than everybody else just naturally? And he's kind of developed that technique. So he gets into his blocks really, really fast. I think the power side that you mentioned is absolutely on point. That's the part that really stands out in his game that makes him a 3rd rounder for me is just you're missing some pure power. You've got to get stronger than you are. But with that said, this gets mitigated a little bit if you move him to a spread-based system where there's not as much of a need to rely on pure power and more of a need to lean into the ability to move around and get to those kind of blocks that they're going to ask them to, use their ability to move. And though the testing numbers at 4.35 and 1.86 at first would look like he couldn't move, he can, Brendan. I think he can pull off those blocks. And I think it's especially indicative of why he is not really a tackle and more of a guard. That those are actually decent guard numbers, but maybe they're just not good tackle numbers. So I like him in the late 3rd round. I think you are right that you have to maybe wait a little bit of time here on this kind of guy, but you have a guy that can have maybe some potential to play both left guard and right guard in his skill set too.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I ended up liking him more than I thought I would. I was not expecting to get in here and thinking I would like him that much, but he's definitely intriguing if we get down into that third round area and we used our first round pick on another position.
Very true. Very true. Got a couple donations here. Thank you guys. Concierge with Nolan. Thank you, Nolan, for the $10 donation. Great to see you in the house tonight, brother. He says, "Hi, bees. I was waiting on a PFF mock. They never trade back for the Hawks. I got to think John tries to trade down. Had me wonder if it's not an even trade, how bad of a deal would you accept to move?" Well, now let's deal with this on two parts, Brendan. Let me ask you this first. So let me cut this up, Nolan, into a couple of questions here. First one, Brendan, the drive in John Schneider to move back. We had a news report break here in the past week. I know you're aware of it. I believe we had 3 teams that Seahawks are reportedly in negotiations with. Washington with their 2 second-round picks, and I was hearing that they might kick in like their third, so you get a 2-3. You get their 2. You trade back and you get the 2 second-round picks and you get a third-round pick to do it. Or you have the Packers where the Hawks would move back to 25, 26 and get a second-round pick. And then there was one other team, I forget, you probably remember, that was the third team that the Hawks reportedly were talking with. Do you remember who it was? It was the least interesting of the deals. That's why I'm forgetting about it. I'm like, I like those other 2 deals better.
Was it Philly? I think they have 2 second round
It was
picks.
Philly. It was Philly.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was Philly. Yeah, I think that was it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's right. Yeah, was it?
Right. So I do think there's a pull to trade back. I do. We don't have a second round pick. We have 1 third round pick. But at the same time, I would hope that they're willing to be flexible depending on what actually happens come draft day.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It's rumor mill season, right? Like I see all this stuff getting talked about in NFL circles right now. And I try really hard to not pay that much attention to it because it's all like, it's just time to say stuff. It's just time to like throw stuff out there. And I don't know how much stock I put into it.
Which of those 2 deals do you take between the Washington double dip to the 3 or the Packers where you still stay in the first round?
I might do that Washington thing because their second round pick is basically a first round pick.
And if they're throwing in that kicker third, that's hard to deny, right? Because on the value chart alone, you
Yeah.
typically would think the 2 2s would be enough to do the move. So you throw that third in and it sort of pushes the needle over the top into Seattle's side of the column, in my
Right.
opinion.
Yeah, who would we think Washington would want in that range that they would want to give up all that to trade up for?
Offensive line, if you're getting your quarterback.
Yeah, okay.
Could be a wide receiver. I mean, look at their wide receiver core right now. I mean, they may have faith in Jahan Dotson, but he averaged 10 yards a catch last year. McLaurin's had some injuries that have mounted up. So I mean, that could be the guy there for them. If you have Brock Bowers there, I think they cut their tight end this offseason. And then, but offensive line stands out, Brendan, where you're talking about Taliese Fuaga or Amarius Mims being there, which is, I think that's the likelihood is that you have of the guys that end up dropping. We end up dropping with one of those prime tackles looking or Latham. And then some team wants to come up and get one of those guys because they have a high grade on them for where they put them in the positional group in this draft versus the rest of the guys.
Yeah, I can see it.
And then the second question on Nolan was, have me wonder if it's not an even trade, how bad of a deal would you accept to move? So Brennan, let's flesh this question out, Nolan. I'm going to kind of take it and run with it a little bit. So, okay, Brendan, you're getting the offer by the Packers to move. So let's say you're getting offered to move to like 24, 25, 26, but you're only getting offered a really early third round pick.
I don't think that's that bad. I don't think that's that bad. I might be okay with that. I mean, at the end of the day, this is we can use the charts all we want to, but what value you can get back in a trade back is dependent on the value that that particular team places on having those picks. So, early third round pick for a 8 spot trade back in the first, I think that's workable.
But if it goes late first, you expect a second.
Yeah, yeah. At a certain point, I definitely just decide, you know what, there's got to be something I can do here at 16. Like,
Right.
even if it's something like Dallas Turner. Like, I like Dallas Turner a lot. I think he's going to be
Sure.
awesome. I
Yeah.
take him at 16. If I'm like, well, I'm not getting the offers I wanted, I take Fuaga at 16 and figure out the rest later.
Yeah.
Bowers could be there. Now, if Bowers is there, I might not even be talking about a trade. But Romo Dunze could be there, and I could just be like, I'll figure this out later. I'm getting Romo Dunze. Odunze,
Yeah.
excuse me.
Odunze. Yeah, I'm in the same category as Brendan on this one. Brendan Nolan, where if it's a matter of 5, 6 spots, maybe 7 even, I'll take the third rounder, and I'm okay doing that because you're in tier 2 anyway, and it's like kind of a freebie pick. But if we're talking about getting the late first round, I need to get the second at that point. If I'm up at 27, 28, 29, 30, like you better be throwing me a second because that's not going to be an early second. That's going to be a late second at that. That's almost basically a de facto early third round pick anyway, when it's that kind of trade as it stands. So it does depend a little bit exactly on how many spaces we're talking, but in just general strokes, Nolan, on that, I'd say that's as far as I'd probably dip down as far as like the very bare minimum we take. Like Brendan says, the bottom line here is there's a damn good player there if they're not going to give you the value. And that's not the worst way to fall back on even if you're, as John, hot to trot to trade back like hell, not the worst way to go on this other side of it.
We have a history of being taken advantage of because everybody knows we want to trade back.
That's
So
right.
I don't want to do that again.
Nope. I want our value if we're going to move back, and they got to give us that value like they do other teams. Let's be one of those teams again that gets the max value. Let's take advantage of teams that are hot to trot to do it rather than we're just frothing at the bit to feel like we have to do it. And I don't want John to be in that mode, and hopefully he's not. But Nolan, thank you for the donation. I appreciate you, man. Very kind of you. Very kind of you. Nolan Lansing, he asks, why no mention of, I'm guessing he means Graham Barton, the Duke player. And Noah, the only reason we're not bringing him up as a transition guy from left tackle to guard is because we covered him in the guard show that we did. He was one of the leading guys that we talked about off the top as far as guys, because it goes without saying at this point that there's no doubt he's transitioning to guard or center. He's not going to be a tackle in the NFL. I don't think you would ask him to do that outside of maybe a game or two if you were just caught in a pinch. So we just looked at him right from the jump as guard center kind of prospect, and one we liked a lot. Noah, we had him both here in the second round, first round even. I think I did say Brent at the time too. I'm right on the edge with those guys in that guard. I think I told you I'm not gonna, and I wouldn't go first round with Bebe or BB or Barton in the first round, but might be driven to do it. They're good enough to be there. And that's right about where their value is at, Noah. So we do like Barton a lot, but we saw him really quickly. And then the rest, he's a goes without saying transition guy.
Yeah, yeah. We talked about him last week, and we had mostly good things to say about him, but like there are so many concerns about his ability to play on the edge that a lot of people think he's going to end up as a center.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's just no way he's going to be a tackle in this league.
Yeah. It's pretty much been completely. Yeah, I'd be surprised if he could make it a tackle at this point with how many. It's just universal. Everyone's like, no. Like you say, it's getting to center too, where they're like, I don't even know if he can do guard. So it may be just center as well, but he's going to be a good player in this league. Doesn't matter where he slides in. He will be a strong player in this league. He'll find a home somewhere. Thank you,
Absolutely.
though. No, I appreciate you for that donation. All right, let's look at the last guy I have on my list here. Brendan is a guy that I would look to make a transition potentially from the outside in, a guy that played right tackle at the college level at Pittsburgh. Matt Goncalves, I believe is the pronunciation. Hopefully I got that right. Big old 6'6" guy, big old monster out there, but a guy I've heard other people talk about is maybe a guy that makes this transition. So I wanted to bring him up. Is he a guy you see staying as a tackle or a guy that could go down to guard as well?
I had him as a left guard here. I do think that maybe he'll offer a little bit of flexibility, which is added bonus value. Great. He's played well the last couple of years, but in 2023 he barely played. He played like 3 games worth, and then I think he got hurt. So
165 total snaps.
Yeah, we're working with not a lot of data here, but he was good in 2022 as well. He's, like you said, 327. That's a little bit bigger than a typical left tackle, so I don't feel like he's going to stay there. He's got a lot of pop in his hands. He was a team captain for the Pittsburgh Panthers, leader. So he uses his hands really well against pass rushers. He's got good hand placement. He times his punches really well, and he's strong enough to withstand power rushers. So right away you're like, okay, he's got some strength here. He's got some ability to really hit with force. So you're thinking maybe he moves to guard. However, he's 6'6", so leverage is a bit of a concern. Is he going to be able to get low enough to win in the interior? He's not particularly good in space from what I've seen. I'm not too blown away with that. Lateral agility is also weak, which is one reason why it's good for him to move inside, but he'll still get beaten by stunts and twists. So it's still not ideal. He's a little slow coming off the ball at the snap, and he barely played last year. So not mobile enough to play tackle, might be too tall to play inside. I don't know where he ends up. I don't know if any position really suits him all that well. Maybe he'll be a right tackle. I'm not convinced here. I think this could go a couple different ways. So I'm off him because we just didn't see him enough in 2023. I'm like 6th round for me. I'd say like sixth.
It's fair. I'm a little bit higher on him in the 4th round because he had such a strong year in 2022. You know, where you're right about this year, it's a very small number, but the previous year was really, really strong. And I think that the power that you mentioned about him, especially his ability to create explosion from his lower half into already naturally heavy hands, gives him a natural ability to just get some drive on that ball off the ball as a run blocker in a way that is, I think, a little bit unique versus other players in this draft, period, just along the offensive line. The lateral part that you mentioned this is why he's got to move in from tackle. 10 years ago, this kid could have worked at right tackle and been your traditional power blocking right tackle, you know, that just goes and takes those edges on a ride. Now he just doesn't have enough of that lateral slide to work at the NFL level, but kick him inside, that stuff gets mitigated. You probably got to kick him all the way to right guard. I don't think he's got even a left guard upside to him, Brendan. I think it's right guard where you got to put him in front of nose tackles and let him mash with that power and just sit in there and be comfortable and good there. But I do think that the power transitions over into the NFL level. Certainly some of the medicals matter on this one, Brendan. You got to lean a little bit back on the 2022 tape. He absolutely annihilates on down blocks. It's part of why I like the mobile bait stuff is that he gets on those down blocks and throws those guys to the ground. And I saw that over and over at times. And that's going to be a kind of block that you're going to execute in this offense quite a bit. But your points about the twitchy, that's the ones that are going to get him the stunts, the blitzers, when he has to go from sliding here and he thinks the guy's going to be here, but no, now the guy's over here. You know, that guy dropped back in coverage. Those are going to be the times where he has his issues. But I still saw a relatively solid prospect. I take a risk on him in the 4th round because I think his athletic attributes into the guard position look kind of nice in there if he can tap back into that 2022 season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
Well, that is the collection of our guards and tackles. Did you have any other guys you want to talk about as far as transitioners go?
What do you think of Brandon Coleman? Where do you think he ends up? He's really weird. He should probably move to guard, but he doesn't look comfortable at guard at all. He looks comfortable at tackle. So I'm having a hard time with Coleman. What do you think of him?
Yeah, there's some issues with him. I think that, like you, there's some first spots that you look at that you think, okay, go move him into guard, enormous proportions, strong as an ox, kind of snappy out of his stance, 3-year starter. You start to go, okay, he doesn't have as necessarily the lateral, like we're talking about the Goncalves, you know, the lateral slide's not there as much. I don't know though if I kind of find myself unsure with him a little bit. He might have just enough to make it out as a right tackle in this sport from an athleticism standpoint, combo blocking and that kind of stuff that you have him do if he was at right guard, for instance. I thought he just didn't have a good feel for that. Like he either ends up in that place where when he's laying the combo block, he's just kind of putting his hands on the guy, not getting any drive or laying any kind of thump in there. And you're doing a lot of that stuff inside of the guard position where it'd be nice to be able to have him unleash some of that, you know, power that he does have. Another guy loses the leverage war a lot. That'd be another worry that I have with kicking him into guard, Brendan, is that he kind of wants to stay high. He just not that he like even works on getting low. It's just like he just wants to be high. Which some of those tackles can get away with that being high. It's okay. They'll have enough length. They can move well enough to do it. He's one of those guys like you talked about on maybe Goncalves where he might be caught a little bit in between for me a little bit. I did like him into the 5th round ish, 4th round ish, late 4th round, 5th round ish, but I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. I think that was really about it. There were maybe 1 or 2 other guys, but they're so far down, it's like tough to even fathom how they end up being good, which is more important than where they play. If they're not going to be good, who cares?
Yeah, it's one of the places you talked about earlier in this show about where the draft drops off. And this is one of the positions where there is going to be that drop off. Certainly at tackle, certainly at center, kind of at guard as well. Where once you get past in that mid fifth round on, it's early fifth round maybe, because there'll probably be a bit of a run on these positions through the early part of the draft. So you're going to need to get them probably somewhat early if you want to get a quality one, and may have to take them around early, unfortunately, too, if that's also the case with the way this might go. I don't know. It's just my general feeling. You got the receiver position, corner position, edge, tackle position, the little bit stronger throughout, a little bit deeper throughout. Well, thank you, Brendan, for doing this show today. I appreciate everybody out there as well for watching today. Oh, we got another dono in. Let me catch this one in here. John, thank you for the $5 donation. He says, what do we know about Max Percher? Another depth piece? Also, what's with this Claypool BS? I hope it's BS. Are we bringing Chase Claypool in?
Yeah, he was in for a visit. I did see that. Okay. So I don't know anything about Percher. He's never played in the NFL before, so there's only, like, even hypothetically, I don't know what I would be able to say about him. Like, it would be based on college stuff. Even Tremaine Ancrum has played in the NFL a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So I got nothing about Percher. As for Claypool, I mean, even if we signed him, he probably wouldn't make the team, right? Like, we're pretty full up at receiver.
Can't see what they're thinking of doing there unless they're looking at moving on. Chase Claypool's a guy with a tantalizing skill set, man. There's no doubt about him being an amazingly talented kid, but he doesn't want to play football, and what he has shown you on tape. The interest is not there. The details don't matter to him. He had that one moment, of course, a couple of years ago, Brendan, where they're trying to run the 2-minute drill and he makes the catch, and he's so busy celebrating the first down catch that he takes about 8 or 9 seconds off the clock, to the point a teammate has to rip the ball out of his hands to set the ball down so that the officials can spot it and that you can keep trying to go win the game. He's probably going to have to sell John pretty heavily on that. I've renounced my ways and I'm ready to do this, because Chicago, after giving up a second round pick, barrel rolled off of that kid as fast as they possibly could. And that's not a good sign in this league when you're going to that second stop like that after Pittsburgh's bailed on you. And good at Pittsburgh to get some value back on him before the wheels, fell off. But I don't think it's happening here, John. It's a possibility. He's going to eat some humble pie on this. If he is, Claypool's not in a position to dictate anything. He's going to have to probably earn his way through, but kid's talented. I can't deny that.
Remember, we've got a 90-man roster to fill. So you need a lot of guys, and some of those guys are just going to be camp bodies, and you know it. So if Claypool's at the point in his life where he's just trying to be a camp body, and I don't know why he would be, with the way he clearly doesn't care about football at that point, just retire.
Sometimes guys don't snap in, Brendan, until there's no more chances left. Some people need to have all of the chances taken where they know there's no line. You make one more mistake, that's it. And that's what can get people to toe that line, understanding there's no room for error. It's rare. I'm not saying it's how everybody thinks. You can sometimes hope to find that. And this is a low cost kind of situation. If you bring this guy in, there's no charge to bringing him in, but he's going to have to sell you on that and somehow sell that on to you, like you say, through the off season program and mini camps and all of that. And so that's, he's got an uphill battle. He did a lot of damage from his reputation. There are some bad cut ups you can find of Claypool, even on Twitter. Yeah. Of him just giving I'm not talking like lackluster effort. I'm talking openly. You watch the tape and the most casual fan would be like, why is that guy not playing? Why did that guy not do anything after the snap? Max Percher, I did find a little bit about this. He is an international guy. This is a kid from Italy, Super Bowl champion, Brendan. He was on the Rams roster. 5.57 40-yard dash, 1.96 10-yard split were his pre-draft measurables, all from his pro day. You know what I mean?
I'll do a little research into it tonight and talk about it tomorrow, but I got nothing right now.
I would say, John, with a 5.57 40-yard dash, he is 6'7". Good arm length on him, but those are pretty slow scores. 4.78 20-yard shuttle, 8.22 3-cone. This is a fringe guy in the back end of your roster to fill your roster out for off-season mini camps and OTAs and whatnot. But a guy that's best case scenario is maybe to make the roster, and maybe I think you can keep on the roster as like one of those international. Don't you get that international exemption thing going on?
Yeah, I don't know exactly how that works.
So,
but yeah, I would not anticipate him making the team unless something goes really, really wrong.
Yeah, especially, I mean, with those numbers at 5.57, 1.96 10-yard split, Brendan, nearly a 2-second 10-yard split. He's going to have a hard time fitting into a spread-based system where mobility is called upon with those pro numbers. That's tough. He's probably improved beyond that at this point, but still 6, 7, and 5/8. How good can he really truly move at that size anyway? Some of those guys are just slow and can't do it. So, is the way it is, and it's just the way it goes at that point. Thank you, though, John, for all your donations. I know a longtime supporter on the channel. Appreciate you for that. Brendan will get you that update on Max tomorrow. Folks, if you could do me this favor, please, and hit that like button today on the channel as you're watching the show. It helps this show up on their algorithms for the rest of the folks out there looking for Seahawks content. As well, if you can for me, please hit the subscribe button, both on this channel and over there on Seahawks Brendan Nelson. It helps us all out tremendously as we're both on the road here to 20,000, trying to get there and hoping to get there this year both. So do help us on that road, as we do really appreciate it. And thank you to everybody for hanging on in here for almost 2.5 hours as we continue these breakdowns. Brendan, thank you for hanging on in there. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we finished the offense. All we got
the offense done, folks. We're halfway there. We got it. We got the offense over. So we turn the page now. We've looked at the offense. We're going to go on Tuesday and turn this over to defensive tackles. We'll be back then on Thursday looking at the edges. So we're going to go heavy and strong with defense here as we move forward. You guys are going to continue every couple of days to get a breakdown of a positional group. So do keep on the lookout for these videos, as they're going to keep coming along here over the next couple of weeks as we start to round this up a little bit, Brendan, as we start to get closer and closer to a very exciting draft that is merely now just a couple of weeks away.
Yeah, I can't wait for it.
Well, thank you again, Brendan, for doing this show as you are with me throughout this off season. Thank you to all of you guys for watching. We really do appreciate it. It's going to be a fun draft here for your Seahawks. They can go a variety of different ways, a variety of different directions. Anything is possible, but that's part of what makes these drafts so great. We appreciate you watching. We will be back in a couple of days, but until that time, please, by God, don't you ever forget. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.